Chapter 662. The great victory of Supreme Tian Luan against Swan Xian finally reversed the decline of the Wanxian League in the grand competition. After the victory, there was joy everywhere in the City of Immortals. Areas A and B were decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and major shops took the opportunity to offer discounts and promotions. The quick-witted businessmen had already made all kinds of products related to Supreme Tian Luan. For example, Supreme Tian Luan had personally certified the best quality medicinal pills, top quality secret methods that had been praised by Supreme Tian Luan, and imitation figurines made from the unique roulette of Supreme Tian Luan. More than half of them were false advertisements. In his early years, before Supreme Tian Luan succeeded in calculating the world of mortals, he was a well-known ascetic cultivator. How could he have so much time to come out to certify medicinal pills and comment on methods? 10,000 Arts sect was recognized as the richest sect in the entire immortal cultivation world. Any resources were almost never sought from outside, so why should he waste his time to come out? As for the imitation roulette figurines, it was purely a wishful thinking of profiteers, hoping that they would not encounter a disciple of 10,000 Arts sect who went out. However, in any case, these goods marked with the mark of Tian Luan were very popular. The buyers, of course, knew the trick. Those who could settle in the City of Immortals were not idiots. Thus, they did not buy it because they believed the advertising words, but purely for the joy. We won. We are happy. We revel. Rich and willful. These people are crazy. The teenager in charge of the shop looked at the revelry outside the shop and could not help but click his tongue and then became depressed. As a seller, he should be overjoyed to encounter a day when the buyers collectively went crazy. Because the things that were difficult to sell on weekdays could be sold at an incredible price. The owners of several shops around him laughed until their lungs broke. Several worthless dishes, because they were urgently printed with the roulette icon of Supreme Tian Luan, were sold at the price of 1 spirit stone each. How could there be such a good business in the world? Sparkling and translucent spirit stones flowed into his account like a steady stream of dirt. It was indeed a carnival, a feast. Alas, is that necessary? Didn't we just win a fight? The score is only 30 points. Before, we lost hundreds of games in a row, and the gap between the civil and martial skills is more than 2,000 points. And just today, didn't we lose 2 small matches? What's there to be happy about? The young man's sigh wasn't loud, but the business owners on both sides of the street all had sharp ears and eyes. After hearing this, they all sneered. Sour, continue being sour. Being ridiculed, the young man's face darkened slightly, but he did not refute. According to his usual temperament, at this time, he would have already quarreled with the fat man on his left and the tall and skinny woman on his right. The little mouse had mingled in the marketplace since he was a child, but he had never had the concept of respecting the elderly. But today, he didn't say a word and ate the other party's mockery. Because their laughter was not wrong. He was indeed sour, extremely sour. His left and right hands were making a lot of money, but he was just a businessman, but he could only sit and watch the market rise, unable to make a move. As for the reasons, it was very simple. After all, this shop wasn't his. He was in charge of the shop's daily operations, but he didn't have the final say in the important matters. The person who had the final say had personally told him not long ago that he was not allowed to participate in today's market. The goods in the shop were not allowed to have any relationship with Supreme Tian Luan. This was, of course, a model of honest management. However, watching his peers become rich in a day, but he only had integrity and conscience as his companions, the torture in his heart was really indescribable. After a long time, the young man couldn't bear the torture, so he directly closed the shop and no longer operated it. What to buy and what to sell was not up to him, but as the only operator of the shop, he could always ask for sick leave in advance, right? From the shop back to his residence, Shu Si directly poured out his grievances to Dead Face. He didn't bother to mention the shop, because not long ago, when Dead Face told him to operate in good faith, they had already quarreled. And the result was clear at a glance, so naturally, there was no need to mention it again. However, the young man couldn't calm down, so he changed the topic and began to complain about this meaningless carnival. Supreme Tian Luan did win, and this victory was indeed delightful. But how useful was a victory? For a victory, it was as if he had already won the grand competition. Wasn't that just deceiving himself? Listening to Xu Xi's complaint, Dead Face didn't even raise his head, because what he said was nonsense. Indeed, this was just a victory, but at the same time, the Wanxian League tasted 2 defeats. Immortal Luo Shui once again showed her unparalleled attainments in the fields of zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, easily defeating the peerless zither master of the Wanxian League. In terms of points, today's Wanxian League lost. However, how could the grand competition be decided in 1 or 2 days? After a long time, Dead Face suddenly raised his head. From now on, prepare to collect goods related to Wang Lu, and they must be genuine. At the same time, in the courtyard of Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu gently put down the brush in his hand. Very good, in this way, it's 3 consecutive victories. The momentum has already taken shape. As long as we continue to win in the next few games, the momentum will snowball and become smoother and smoother, and then, Wang Lu said and suddenly raised his head. Do you guys think it's necessary to stock up some of my exclusive goods from now on? Hai Yunfan sighed and said, if you have the energy, why don't you think about the next game? If you want money, why can't you get it with your power? TSK, how can rape and adultery be lumped together? That being said, Wang Lu turned his attention back to the desk. However, after reading 2 documents, he felt that his hands were empty. He looked up and said, Little Hai, what about the next document? Hai Yunfan said, they're all here. I'll help you deal with them later. Don't look at me like that, no one wants to usurp power. It's just that as a secretary, I need to remind you that there are more things that need your attention now. No matter how you plan to take advantage of the next few games, you have to fight in person at the last pass. But so far, most of your energy has been used to deal with these paperwork, and the progress of your cultivation is not optimistic. Wang Lu was stunned when he heard this. Little Hai, I didn't expect you to be so concerned about my situation. Could it be that you recently quarreled with your wife, so you fell in love with me? Unfortunately, I, the domineering chief planner, am not a person of that circle. Hai Yunfan sighed and said, even if I really quarreled with Feifei, it must be because you forcibly recruited me as a secretary, causing us to live apart. And from the beginning, it was you who spread the rumor that I was a person of that circle. Of course, I know that you always plan ahead and have a card up your sleeve. But as the main commander of the King Pill War, it's better for you to cultivate longer than shorter. There aren't that many jobs here that you can't do, so you don't need to waste too much time here. Wang Lu was silent for a while and also sighed. I also want to cultivate in seclusion immediately, but there are actually many jobs here that I can't do. Don't be fooled by the festive decorations outside. However, the situation was far from being optimistic. Just as everyone was celebrating, Fairy Luo Shui killed 2 of our generals in the other 2 arenas that were competing in zither skills. In terms of points, we didn't gain anything today. The next competition is scheduled to be held in 2 days, but there are still 3 small competitions to be held in these 2 days. Previously, we used all kinds of reasons to avoid them, but now we can't delay it any longer. And even if we win the competition in 2 days, we can't make up for the deficit of those 3 competitions. The situation is not so encouraging. Hai Yunfan said, the situation is indeed not optimistic, but Dixian's comprehensive strength is far better than ours, and they are carrying out a strategy of suppression at the beginning, so this situation is not surprising. So we designed the strategy of using points to exchange for time. First, we arranged some weaker players to participate in some competitions with fewer points. And the main force will take this opportunity to step up their cultivation and improve their strength, so that they can counterattack in the future. Your recent activity is also to boost the morale. When the morale reaches its peak, you will completely blow the horn of counterattack and send the main force players to the competition to win points. So, isn't it normal to lose points now? Wang Lu said, the problem is that the main force players have already started to play one after another. Hai Yunfan was suddenly shocked. What? In fact, in the original plan, I didn't intend to let the Wanxian League lose for a month in a row. At that time, the expectation was to try to maintain a balance in the competition. Even if the overall loss was more than win, at least it could maintain the fighting spirit. So the main force and the cannon fodder took turns to play. The cannon fodder made the opponent relax their vigilance, and the main force occasionally took advantage of the situation to advance and support the situation. But in fact, the first batch of the main force, which was pinned with high hopes, was almost defeated in the first battle. They were suppressed on the field and had no power to fight back. Their performance was no different from that of the cannon fodder, let alone support the situation. Do you think I deliberately baited the master of the heaven book building? Although it is indeed a good thing to take the opportunity to wipe out the evil spirits, wouldn't it be better if they could not even speak from the beginning? After listening to Wang Lu's explanation, Hai Yunfan felt a burst of dizziness in his mind, full of incredulity. During this time, he was Wang Lu's working secretary. Most of the documents were presented to Wang Lu through his hands. It could be said that he was the clearest about Wang Lu's layout and plan. But he had never heard of such an inside story. Because I beat them at their own game in time, and I didn't have much confidence in them from the beginning. As soon as I saw that things were not going well, I immediately changed my mind and regarded it as part of the plan. I didn't tell anyone about this except for Supreme He too and a few other people, let alone in writing. So, of course, you won't know. But in general, I have been sending the main force to play for the past month, and most of the main force players have lost. Hai Yunfan was silent for a long time. In this case, even if you personally win the King Pill battle in the future, what's the point of raising the morale to the peak? It's just to give everyone a fantasy of victory. Wang Lu said, "This is what I am doing now. I plan the schedule reasonably and design the lineup. Even if there is only a slim chance of winning, I will try my best to fight for it. This is what I am doing and the only thing I can do. Is there no one else who can do it except you?" Of course there is. There is no lack of excellent bureaucratic talents among the elders in Heavenly Sage Hall. It is easy for them to handle some routine work, but can I let them take over now? Wang Lu smiled. Everyone knows that I am the host of the Wanxian League at present. If I suddenly change people, what will everyone think? Will the morale that has just been raised change? Hai Yunfan felt a little heavier. Putting so many problems on you, a king pill with less than 30 years of cultivation, will probably become the shame of the Wanxian League thousands of years later. Wang Lu said, on the contrary, thousands of years later, people will only praise the Wanxian League led by Supreme He too for knowing people well and not sticking to one pattern, choosing the most correct person at the most critical time. After that, Wang Lu stood up, stretched his wrist, and said with a relaxed smile, "Don't worry, although the situation is indeed not optimistic, since I am here, the victory will definitely belong to us." Hai Yunfan looked at Wang Lu's smile, only feeling that it was as bright as the sun, particularly dazzling. Chapter 663. The latest news: Supreme Tian Luan defeated Fairy Luo Shui again in the 96 chessboard match, winning 2 games and getting 30 points. In the bustling market of Area B3, a young cultivator was flying on a flying sword. His figure was like a ray of light. In an instant, he flew a few laps around the vast Area B3 and kept repeating the news of his victory. A moment later, the B3 area turned into a sea of joy. At the same time, the same plot played out in various areas of the City of Immortals. The news that Supreme Tian Luan defeated Fairy Luo Shui, who was proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting on the chessboard made the whole City of Immortals burn. People shouted the name of Supreme Tian Luan with great enthusiasm. The only pity was that there were many games going on the same day, so the signboards arranged in various areas did not broadcast the game between Supreme Tian Luan and Fairy Luo Shui on the chessboard. Therefore, many people could not immediately learn the news of the victory, let alone see the heroic appearance of Supreme Tian Luan defeating Dixian. He's indeed the leader of the 5 uniques, he's really extraordinary. He defeated 2 Dixian in succession, and even the undefeated Fairy Luo Shui lost to him. In a restaurant in Human 5 area, a Yuanying stage cultivator sighed with emotion. He then poured himself a cup of immortal wine and raised it to the sky to toast Supreme Tian Luan. Opposite him, an old friend of many years also raised his cup and said, "To Taoist Master Wang Lu." Upon hearing this, the Yuanying stage cultivator smiled and said, "Yes, I also want to salute Taoist Master Wang Lu." If there was no Taoist Master Wang Lu, I'm afraid Supreme Tian Luan would not have won so easily. Yes, it is said that Taoist Master Wang Lu made a lot of effort in the preparation before the game. Alas, I don't know how he cultivated. In less than 30 years, his cultivation base reached the peak of King Pill, far above the fighting strength of King Pill, and he even has this omnipotent all-rounder. Alas, thinking of you and me in those days, it's really shameful. Ha ha ha, throughout the 100,000 years of 9 regions, only immortal Qin and great ancestor Disheng could be better than him, right? When Emperor Shi Huang came out, the whole world was shocked. From the moment he obtained the Tao to the moment he ascended, it only took him a few decades to perfect his immortal cultivation. Incidentally, he also unified the immortal cultivation world of the 9 regions. Comparing with this kind of genius was simply asking for trouble. We just need to enjoy the victory that he has brought us. The 2 nascent soul cultivators looked at each other and smiled. They finished the wine in their cups, but just as they were enjoying themselves, they heard a cold snort from the next table. Isn't it too early to celebrate the victory? Supreme Tian Luan won 2 battles, but he only got 30 points. However, the Wanxian League had lost 50 points in the previous 2 days. What was there to be happy about? What's more, the 2 victories were all thanks to Supreme Tian Luan's unparalleled divination. If it was in other fields, Supreme Tian Luan's divination would be useless, so what else could Wang Lu use to win? These words were like a bucket of cold water in the celebratory atmosphere. The 2 Yuanying stage cultivators put down the wine in their cups and turned to look at the next table. They saw a thin cultivator covered in a cloak. And when she saw him, the tipsy feeling from before was completely ruined. Who the hell are you? How dare you talk nonsense here? The thin cloaked man at the next table sneered. Whether I'm talking nonsense or telling the truth, you should know it in your heart. Wang Lu is now nothing more than a performance, exaggerating a victory for you to see, so that you really think that the situation is good and the final victory is beyond doubt. But in fact, people with sober minds can see that the situation has been deteriorating. Damn it, hiding your head and showing your tail, who the hell are you? A Yuanying stage cultivator was extremely angry. He stood up and waved his hand. His true yuan turned into an invisible force and mercilessly lifted the cloak of the person at the next table. The thin person didn't seem to expect that this Yuanying stage cultivator dared to directly attack her under the influence of alcohol. Immediately, her cloak was lifted and she was caught off guard. There were many restaurants in this area, but for a long time, not many people dared to drink and make trouble here. Because there were also many golden armored soldiers here. Using spells on others without permission was regarded as a violation of the rules of the City of Immortals and would be mercilessly punished by the golden armored soldiers. Sure enough, less than 2 breaths after the old Yuanying stage cultivator made his move, 2 golden armored soldiers appeared in the restaurant and restrained the old Yuanying stage cultivator. According to the rules of the City of Immortals, although his violation was not serious, just lifting a person's cloak, he could not be exempted from responsibility. He must spend a day in the small dark room. If he committed it again, the punishment would be increased by 1 level, 100 days in the small dark room. The small dark room in the City of Immortals was also famous. It was a place that was enough to make people with a stable Tao heart afraid. However, the old Yuanying stage cultivator turned a blind eye to this. His eyes were firmly locked on the person whose cloak was lifted by him, because he had recognized the identity of the other party. It's you, the maid of the master of heavenly book building, Mo Xiang. The companion of the old Yuanying stage cultivator sneered and said, "It turns out to be the remnant of heavenly book building. No wonder you dare to talk nonsense here. Presumably, you've already been bought by the Dixian and are willing to be a running dog." On that day, Taoist Master Wang Lu was merciful and didn't catch all of you accomplices. Unexpectedly, you didn't repent at all. Mo Xiang sneered and said, repent? What do I have to repent for? Do I regret saying the truth that you dare not say or even dare not listen to? Wang Lu took the opportunity of the grand competition to crack down on the dissidents and could not tolerate the slightest dissenting voice. The whole city was cheering, but in fact, the gap between the Wuxian League and the Dixian League was getting bigger and bigger. How could you still laugh? Such a stupid thing. I really can't find a few precedents in the history books. There are too many people like you who are willing to degenerate and even willing to be lowly. From today's grand competition to the two great wars of immortals and demons, and even the bloody war of the human race in the Age of Desolation, vicious villains who betrayed the interests of their own race have always emerged one after another, and none of them had a good end. A cultivator sitting in a corner of the restaurant suddenly stood up and scolded in a stern voice. His words were righteous and stern, which won the approval of the people in the restaurant. However, Mo Xiang was silent for a moment, and then she sneered and said, I was wondering who could speak such high-sounding words so smoothly. Turns out it's Wang Lu's running dog, Hai Yunfan. This eagerness to kneel down and lick the balls is actually in line with your sex inheritance. 10,000 Arts sect often regarded themselves as wise, putting on a noble and elegant posture. However, since the establishment of the sect, they've always followed the leader and picked the leftover bones. Before the Age of Chaos, you fawned on Kunlun sect. Then, when Xingjing sect flourished, you fawned on Xingjing sect again. Now, even Wang Lu can order your supreme sect leader. Do dog-like slaves have the right to accuse me? Mo Xiang's words were extremely vicious, which made all the listeners frown. Hai Yunfan was so angry that he actually laughed, and his magical power swelled up. Today, it was rare for Wang Lu to give him a day off, so that he could have the opportunity to accompany his wife to eat and go shopping in the city of immortals, and live a sweet married life. As a result, he met this mad dog before he could even eat half of the meal. Were it not for his wife, Yi Feifei, to hold him back, this gentle young man would have directly stepped forward with his sword. Seeing this, Mo Xiang laughed even more, and her laughter was full of desolation. You gathered here because you believe that Wang Lu can bring you victory. But don't forget that Wang Lu is just a king pill, far from omnipotent as you imagine. If he really has the ability to win for the Wuxian League, he would not have allowed the Wuxian League to fail more than 100 times in the past month. With his character, if he has any ability, he should have used it long ago. Allowing the Wuxian League to lose in a row only shows that he is at his wit's end, and now he is just struggling at death's door. Do you really think that those King Pill Yuanian cultivators who were selected as the main force could advance by leaps and bounds and reverse the situation after just a few months of training? Based on what? Do you think that in the past month or so, only the Wuxian League is willing to work hard, while the Dixian cultivators are stagnant? They are also making progress. By adapting to the rules of the grand competition, they continue to exert their strength to the extreme. The so-called classification competition is a joke from the beginning, because the speed at which the Dixian cultivators adapt to the rules is much faster than that of a group of King Pill Yuanian cultivators. The longer the time, the farther away you will be from victory. Such a simple truth, but you actually deceive yourselves and turn a blind eye to it. Ha ha ha, if it were someone else, they might be stupid, but is Wang Lu also stupid? I'm afraid that he has already secretly reached a deal with the Dixian cultivators, selling you stupid low-level cultivators in exchange for future benefits. And he too and Tianluan are all Wang Lu's accomplices, so they tolerate his unscrupulous behavior. These words were like the cold winter wind whistling past, but no one in the restaurant refuted it. Since the master of heavenly book building, Supreme Ting Feng, was broken by Aya's sword and the scandal was exposed, this long-standing high-rank sect declined at an alarming rate. The elders and disciples fled one after another, and the remaining ones also showed a sense of dejection. The sect no longer had the previous determination to make progress. In this way, in just 2 or 3 years, heavenly book building would be removed from the list of high-rank sects, and it would be difficult for them to make a comeback in thousands of years. As a remnant of heavenly book building, after losing her master, Mo Xiang had no one to rely on. Her mind became increasingly distorted, and the gentle and elegant beauty gradually degenerated into ferocious and mournful. However, Mo Xiang's ferocious expression did not hinder her sharp words, which went straight into people's hearts. What she said seemed absurd, but for a while, it was difficult for people to refute. Therefore, the restaurant maintained an indescribable silence. Until a slightly drunken laughter came. A group of idiots, they can actually be frightened by such a fallacy. Forget about other people, but Hai Yunfan, you work with Wang Lu every day and have been in contact with him for so many times. Haven't you learned a little bit of his sharp tongue? With that, a woman full of the smell of wine and meat walked down the stairs slowly while shaking a wine bottle. She looked 23 or 24 years old, wearing a simple and somewhat crude plain dress. Her facial features were delicate, and her temperament was natural and unrestrained, almost sloppy. The woman's cultivation base was around Yuanying stage. She held a wine bottle in her right hand and a string of beads on her left wrist, showing her identity as a Zen cultivator. Hai Yunfan was stunned for a moment. Zen Master Guru? Chapter 664. Zen Master Guru's seventh madam had a mediocre reputation in 9 regions, but Hai Yunfan and Wang Lu had been pen pals for many years. How could he not recognize this good friend of Supreme Nanfei's? Seeing her coming, Hai Yunfan's heart was also relieved. Although she didn't have the sharp record of the master and disciple of Nanfei's, since she could become a friend of those two, especially a friend recognized by Wang Wu, she would never be an ordinary person. She criticized Hai Yunfan for not inheriting Wang Lu's sharp tongue, so she must be an expert in this field. Sure enough, after Zen Master Guru appeared, he sneered at Mo Xiang and said, "You, this bitch, are very happy to bark. Without the nourishment of your master, you become hungry and thirsty." This sentence made Hai Yunfan sigh with emotion. She's indeed worthy to be a friend of the master and disciple. As soon as she opened her mouth, it was already dirty. The air pollution index of the entire restaurant had risen by an order of magnitude. However, although this kind of personal attack could relieve the anger, it could not relieve the anxiety brought by Mo Xiang. Because what Mo Xiang said was the truth, and how could the truth be refuted? In fact, Mo Xiang just smiled lightly at seventh madam's insult and turned a deaf ear to it. However, the next words of seventh madam forced her to be serious. The road of immortal cultivation is a narrow road that constantly narrows. Thousands of people go on the road, but only a few people can reach the highest point. Most people will stop halfway. However, some people will choose to enjoy the scenery under their feet, while others will complain and drag more people into the abyss with resentment. All of us have heard this saying, immortal cultivation is the privilege of geniuses. Only peerless geniuses are qualified to reach the highest realm. Ordinary people don't need to work hard at all, because there will be no results even if they work hard. Whenever we are stuck in a bottleneck, there will always be people who jump out and say let's give up and find thousands of reasons to prove that the road ahead is not feasible. Such people have existed since the age of desolation, and they will continue to exist in the future. This bitch is only one of them. The question is, are you all willing to be dragged down by her? As she spoke, seventh madam took a sip of wine, and the drunkenness and momentum surged at the same time. The path of cultivation is a path of never admitting defeat and constantly challenging the limit. We start from body forging, qi training, foundation building, shudan, and then to the king pill, nascent soul and soul transformation. Except for a very small number of talented people, most of us have to go through a lot of obstacles. More than half of the practitioners can be eliminated at any of the checkpoints. The barrier between the Shudan pill and the King pill makes 8 or 9 out of 10 practitioners in the world feel powerless. But everyone here has overcome these difficulties before. Don't tell me that every time you overcome a bottleneck, you all have 100% confidence. Many customers in the restaurant secretly nodded. Apart from a small number of people present, most of them came from ordinary backgrounds and did not enjoy the massive resources of high-rank sects when they cultivated. Every time they broke through to the next realm, they had to face great uncertainty. However, they still broke through one by one and persisted until now. There were even quite a few people who didn't even have a 10% chance of success when they broke through to the next realm, but in the end, they made up their minds to make a bold gamble and won a brand new world. Immortal cultivation is like this, isn't the grand competition the same? We have all kinds of reasons to lose, and the possibility of winning may not even be 1/10 or 100th. However, we will still move forward and cut through the thorns and thorns, because this is the road that cultivators should take. When we set foot on the immortal path, we should realize where our destiny is. Immortal cultivation is going against the heaven. Cultivators are born to go against the heaven. Seventh Madam said, took another sip of the liquor in the gourd, and then said with emotion, the reason why Wang Lu never admitted defeat, even when he was in deep trouble in the Wanxian League, was that he had the awareness of a real cultivator. He deeply understood that this was a road that could not be turned back. Until the last trace of his life was burned, he should move forward. People often talked about the miraculous battles he had created, or envied him for his innate void spirit root, or praised him for his ever-changing wit. But few people thought that the real reason why he was unreachable was his exuberant fighting spirit that never gave up. Even if he met the Holy One of the Western continent when he was in Shudan stage, he would still pull out his sword and move forward. No matter what enemy he met, he never admitted defeat. According to the numbers, is his chance of winning even 1 in 10,000? But if he gave up fighting because of this, he would have been a pile of bones by now. So, I really think you guys are ridiculous. Seventh Madam smiled sarcastically, you guys actually doubt that Wang Lu defected to Dixian? When did he ever admit defeat in his life? When did he betray his own people? Is a mere Dixian worthy of him to betray his own principles? You guys underestimate him too much. Although he is only a Daoist Master King Pill, he is more of a cultivator than anyone else here. After a long silence, Mo Xiang sneered and said, no matter how powerful Wang Lu is, he is only one person. Yes, Wang Lu is only one person, so he actually needs everyone's help. This is a major event related to the fate of 9 regions. Each of us is involved in it, so there's no reason to sit back and watch. Because of this, Hichu Daoran would delegate power, Heavenly Sage Hall would sit back and watch, and the dignified Supreme Tianluan would be willing to be driven by him. Because they all knew what they should do at this time, and they all knew how they should do their best to fight for victory. Even if they have to pay a lot, even if the odds of winning are small. Unfortunately, there are too few people who have this awareness. Seeing you guys, I can't help but feel ridiculous and sad. When they are fighting for you in the front line, you guys are questioning them in the rear. So, I would think, is it worth it for them to fight so hard for trash like you? These words made the cheeks of countless people in the restaurant red and sweated profusely. Some people's mood was so agitated that blood flowed from the corner of their mouth. Because in this restaurant, there happened to be a considerable number of people who were included in the list of 2,000 contestants of the grand competition. They were supposed to fight side by side with Wang Lu, but just now, because of Mo Xiang's words, their faith was shaken. The idea of giving up and admitting defeat flashed across their minds, which was indeed shameful. However, when they turned their heads and looked at the maid of Heavenly Book building, their eyes gradually became cold. If it weren't for her incitement, how could their faith be shaken and give birth to such a shameful idea? Oh. Are you blaming me? Mo Xiang smiled grimly, yes, I am indeed tempting you, but every word I said is the truth. No matter how hard you fight, the odds of winning are only 1 in a billion. And in this world, not everyone is like Wang Lu, who can never admit defeat. As long as you are aware of the fact that you will fail, you will definitely fail. Definitely. Your mother's fart. I'll kill you. A hot-tempered cultivator was about to pounce on her. However, Mo Xiang's mood was even more agitated. Good, you'd better kill me now, and then I can curse each of you with my own death. I curse you to always have every word I said in your mind. Good. When Mo Xiang's madness reached its climax, Seventh Madam suddenly nodded and then moved her hand. The next moment, Mo Xiang's voice stopped abruptly. Because she was already dead. Her beautiful head fell to the ground with a ferocious smile. The headless body stood in place for a moment and then fell silently. Seventh Madam shook her wrist as if to shake off the dust on it. She frowned and said, "Disgusting." The people in the restaurant were stunned. She actually did it? She ignored the rules in the City of Immortals and killed people in front of the golden-armored soldiers? Did she not want her life anymore? Although that crazy woman deserved to be killed, these golden-armored warriors weren't that reasonable. Were they supposed to be merciless towards those who violated the rules? However, the more surprising scene was yet to come. It was clear that Qinyang had killed Mo Xiang, but the few golden-armored strongmen turned a blind eye to it. They just carried the yuanying old man who lifted Mo Xiang's broken body and was punished to stay in the small dark room. Gradually, they left. That yuanying stage old man had long been ready to squat in the small dark room with a heroic posture. However, at this time, he was shocked and then struggled vigorously. "Hey, are you blind? There's a murderer over there, can't you see it? You actually want to make life difficult for me, this old man? You don't care about killing people, but it's wrong for me to lift the cloak." However, when did the golden-armored soldiers have the space to communicate? They just silently took the old man away from the restaurant, and the old man's angry scolding continued all the way. The people in the restaurant looked at Seventh Madam in shock and began to guess her identity. Some people even secretly retreated, thinking that this person was really dangerous. Seeing this, Seventh Madam sneered, "You guys are really rotten wood that can't be carved. I just killed a person who deserved to be killed, so of course, I won't be stopped by the golden-armored soldiers. Otherwise, wouldn't this City of Immortals become a paradise for criminals? If they commit a great sin, as long as they escape here, no one can do anything to them." A cultivator was startled when he heard this. This is indeed unreasonable, but who should judge whether a person deserves to be killed or not? Seventh Madam looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. "If you commit a crime outside, don't you know who will punish you? If I commit a crime outside, of course it's the Wanxian League. Hey, is the authority of the Wanxian League also effective in the City of Immortals? Otherwise, do you expect those Dixian to try the case for you? As long as it's a sinner certified by the Wanxian League, there will be no human rights protection here." "Then why did the old man Lu Mei?" Seventh Madam explained quite impatiently, "Of course, it's because she didn't do anything at that time. But later, she talked nonsense here, which was authenticated and the evidence was conclusive, so the Wanxian League issued a kill order." "Okay, I know you want to ask who certified her crime. Look over there, it's the couple in the corner. The woman is Yi Feifei, an inner court disciple of 10,000 Arts sect. The man is Hai Yunfan, Wang Lu's current working secretary. He's familiar with the rules and regulations in the City of Immortals. So, I don't need to say any more nonsense, you idiots." Strictly speaking, Seventh Madam was a broad-minded, hearty, and generous woman. However, in the face of a group of stupid people, her patience was far less than her Zen cultivation base. "Alas, seeing your clumsy performance, it's no wonder that people can't raise their confidence." Seventh Madam sighed, but then she smiled and said, "Fortunately, we're here this time." "We?" Everyone keenly captured this word. At the same time, a hearty laughter came from upstairs. "Seventh Madam is still so swift and decisive. When I was about to make my move, you've already killed her. Fortunately, the body is intact, so it can be used by a Wu." As they talked and laughed, a tall barbarian woman wearing a simple animal skin and a feather crown on her head walked down with heavy steps. Every step she took made the stairs tremble. If this restaurant was not built by an earth immortal and was of high quality, the stairs would have been broken long ago. Behind the barbarian woman, there was a handsome scholar in white. She had delicate eyebrows, red lips, and white teeth. Clearly, she was a woman dressed as a man. A gorgeous and enchanting dancer, and a native witch doctor covered with totems. All of them were women with different identities and temperaments, but they were all King Pill and Yuanying stage cultivators. Moreover, their imposing manner was astonishing. In the same stage, the gap between cultivators could be hundreds or thousands of times. For example, the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions was enough to crush 1,000 King Pill Xiaoming. And these women were undoubtedly the top powerhouses in their respective stages. Such powerhouses were rare, and they appeared at the same time, which made people curious. Who were they and where did they come from? Because many of the people present were experienced and knowledgeable, but they couldn't call out the names of these powerhouses. Seeing the doubt in everyone's eyes, Seventh Madam raised her head slightly. We are the people who can bring you victory. While everyone was stunned, they suddenly saw the witch doctor walk to Mo Xiang's body, pick up her head, and grin. Good stuff. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Chapter 665. In Human 5 area, a group of strange women appeared in the prosperous Shun Pavilion restaurant, which soon attracted a lot of attention. In the City of Immortals, talented people emerged endlessly. Although the major sects of the Wuxia League occupied the mainstream, there were also many talents among the loose cultivators. In the City of Immortals, if there was a slight opportunity, one could amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, and Qinyang had done it with a brilliant feat. She killed the former maid of the Master of Heavenly Book Building, Mo Xiang, who was in Yuanying stage. It was not a big deal. Although Mo Xiang's stage was high, her actual combat ability was not strong. Many Yuanying stage cultivators could easily kill her. What caught people's attention was her impassioned refutation of Mo Xiang. The morale-boosting words were not the point, because at that time, there was no one who was good at eloquence among the people present. The contestants who dined in the prosperous Shun Pavilion restaurant all participated in the fighting event, not the literary event. Otherwise, there would be no need for Seventh Madam to come forward. Someone would be able to say that. Except for the last sentence. After killing Mo Xiang, Seventh Madam handed Mo Xiang's body to a witch doctor of unknown origin and declared that they were the ones who could bring victory to the Wuxia League. How to deal with Mo Xiang's body was not the point was Seventh Madam's declaration of victory. If Seventh Madam was just an ordinary Yuanying stage cultivator, her words would naturally be insignificant. Every drunk cultivator in the Human 5 area restaurant might say something similar. But Seventh Madam was obviously serious. She wanted to bring victory to the Wuxia League. Although people were not familiar with Seventh Madam, they were at least familiar with her friends, Wang Wu and Wang Lu. So, her words were not without purpose. Coupled with several of her companions with different appearances and temperaments, it was not difficult for people to imagine what they were going to do next. I know that their strength is definitely not weak. The problem is, they were not in the list of 2,000 people at first. Who are they? In the lava cave of Royal Soldier Sect, Jianghu, an inner court disciple of Xingjing's sect who was forced to sweat by the harsh environment, looked at the notice in his hand with great puzzlement. It was a notice issued by the organizing committee of the Union of 10,000 Immortals from the City of Immortals. The content was very simple. In the next week, the Union of 10,000 Immortals would change the contestants. And Jianghu, the Power King, was one of the candidates to be changed. At present, his cultivation base was low-level Jindan, which was quite good in terms of his cultivation time. However, it was quite difficult for him to participate in the grand competition. However, with the support of the sect, due to a coincidental breakthrough, his Power King true body had achieved great success, and the strength of his corporeal body had skyrocketed. There were already very few opponents in the Jindan realm who could rival him. And the months of harsh experiential learning in Royal Soldier Sect also made his strength advance by leaps and bounds. Once he walked out of the lava cave, he would be reborn. At that time, as long as he used the power of the elixirs, he would be able to reach the peak of the King Pill level for 2 hours. Combined with the large success of the Power King true body, he would be qualified to participate in the King Pill level Power King competition. Previously, he even competed with Xiang Liang, the lead disciple of Royal Soldier Sect. Of course, Xiang Liang was not good at pure wrist strength, but as the lead disciple of Royal Soldier Sect, his wrist strength absolutely surpassed 99% of cultivators in the same realm. However, he still frowned and lost 3 matches in a row. This thoroughly established Jianglu's official position. Jianglu himself was very proud of this. It was a great honor to be able to represent his sect in the grand competition. Among the cultivators of the younger generation, only geniuses at the level of the chief disciples of the 5 uniques had the qualifications to participate. And Jianghu being able to keep pace with them was undoubtedly the best proof for himself. Unfortunately, this pride and joy was completely broken by the notice in front of him. From official to substitute, he had to give his position to an unknown barbarian woman. Even if his big sister personally came to tell him about this, he would still find it hard to accept. Senior sister Qianghua, do you know them? I mean the woman who replaced me. The lead disciple of Xingjing sect shook her head. I've heard a little, but I don't know her. Yuzhou of Song, the Tuka, of the Song clan of Red Wave Lake in Min region, which means the lead disciple. Min region? Song clan? Among the 9 regions, the most barbaric place was Min region. And in Min region, there was an unknown small tribe, which was far beyond the scope of Jianglu's knowledge. Only a knowledgeable person like Qianghua could do this. However, even Qianghua knew very little about Yuzhou of Song. Before this, I only know that she has the power comparable to the peak of King Pil, which allowed the Song clan to maintain its independence under the expansion of Heaven tribe. However, there has been no detailed and reliable example of her fighting, so it's difficult to judge her real strength. Thus, it's normal for you to be dissatisfied. Qianghua said and then looked at Jianglu. However, this result is beneficial to you. Beneficial? Senior sister, you clearly know how much I've paid for this day. Qianghua calmly said, according to the elder's deduction, your chance of winning in the competition is only 15%, but the probability of casualties is as high as 80%. In order to shock us with morale, Dixian people are very ruthless, and once you lose in this contest of strength, it's likely that you'll die. Jianglu earnestly said, I don't care. Yes, that's why the sect initially didn't prevent you from participating in the competition. Because even if your blood spilled on the battlefield, it's still beneficial to the overall situation. You're a young man, and young people's hot blood can stimulate more people's hot blood. However, now there's a person with a higher chance of winning, and even if she's defeated, the impact on the sect would be lower, so we have no reason not to choose her. Qianghua was silent for a moment, and then said, the grand competition is a good stage, but on this stage, strength is king. Jianglu closed his eyes for a moment. I have nothing to say if my strength is not as good as others, but if I lose without a fight, I'm not convinced. Okay, she's outside the cave. Jianglu was a bit surprised, but then he thought that since it was arranged by his senior sister, it was not surprising. Outside the cave, the tall barbarian woman was looking at the distant mountains with interest. When Qianghua led Jianglu out of the cave, she just turned her head and looked at Jianglu. Not bad. The woman named Yuzhou of Song nodded. Just a bit weak. Jianglu raised his eyebrows. This woman's cultivation base was not necessarily high, but her tone was surprisingly big. She was just at the peak of King Pil. Among the friends of 7th Madam, she was obviously one of the weakest. Of course, if her cultivation base was strong, she would also enter the Yuanian group and would not occupy Jianglu's position. What qualification did she have to say that he was weak? Power King True Body was one of the top 10 body training methods in the immortal cultivation world. In terms of pure power, it could even be ranked in the top 3. In the true body state, it was even better than some of the different species. In the same stage, except for that abnormal number 1 King Pil in 9 regions, who dared to say that they could win against him? Even Xiang Liang couldn't, could this barbarian woman? But the next moment, he closed his mouth. Because Yuzhou of Song had already made her move. She swung her fist backwards, and when her fist hit the air, it produced a thunderous boom, and a clear crack appeared in the air. At first, Jianglu thought that it was the distortion of sight caused by the airflow, but soon he found out that it was not only that, because behind the crack, there was a long snake rolling forward. Countless air waves spread along with the long snake, setting off a gust of wind in the lava valley. In the blink of an eye, the long snake came to a mountain. The snake's head was ferocious, and it bit down at the mountain. The rocks cracked and the mountain collapsed. The height of the mountain was cut down by more than 300 meters. Jianglu's face was pale. Because the power of this punch had far exceeded his imagination. With just the power of one punch, a mountain was destroyed from several miles away. This had far exceeded the level of the king pill in the general sense. Not to mention that he was only a low-level king pill. Even if he reached the peak of king pill with the help of the power of the elixir, it was impossible to do the same thing. After a long time, Jianglu dryly said, Wuxia of Song just patted him on the shoulder. Go back and train well. I look forward to competing with you in a few years. Yes. Jianglu's response seemed to be lost. Looking at the gap in the distant mountain, the inheritor of Power King True body seemed to be deflated. Humph, unexpectedly, a barbarian like you has learned the ways of the world. Before you leave, you still know how to say some beautiful words, so that the child's heart won't die. I haven't seen you for a few years, but your IQ has really increased. At the foot of Royal Soldier Mountain, an enchanting dancer covered her face with a fan in her hand, revealing only a pair of enchanting eyes that flashed with wonderful brilliance. She looked up and down at Wuxia of Song, as if she was full of curiosity about her. The barbarian woman disdainfully spat. Who's interested in learning those useless things? It's what the scholar taught me to say. TCH, the Wanxian League actually chose such a waste to fight with Dixian. There's really no one available. If there's someone available, Wang Wu wouldn't have urgently called us here. While speaking, a white-clothed scholar came and looked at the barbarian woman and the dancer with a smile. It seems that you've solved it. Then don't waste any more time, come with me. A Wu has already gone ahead of time. With that, the scholar picked up a pen dipped in ink and wrote the word door in the air. The next moment, the words suddenly expanded and then really turned into a door. The scholar pushed the door open. Behind the door was a ball of fire. The fragrance of wine, dishes, and laughter all surged out of the door. Among them, Seventh Madam's carefree laughter was particularly loud. The barbarian woman's heroic eyebrows suddenly raised and the corner of her mouth raised into a smile. These guys, they actually didn't wait for me to eat and drink. With that, she stepped through the door and took the lead in joining the hustle and bustle. Behind the door was a private room of a restaurant. In the middle of the room, there was a large round table, on which there were rare delicacies and exquisite wine. There were already 6 people sitting at the table. There was Zen Master Guru and 7th Madam, Savage Witch Dr. A Wu, Night King Aya of Western Continent, and Luli with brilliant sword heart. Of course, there was also the master and disciple of Non-Phase Peak who could bring these people together. This was a welcoming banquet specially arranged in the most luxurious restaurant in the City of Immortals by Wang Wu's invitation and hosted by Wang Lu. Seeing the barbarian woman come in, Wang Wu put down the wine gourd and stood up in surprise. Ha, it's Yu. The barbarian woman stepped forward, hugged Wang Wu, and then held her high. Xiao Wu, long time no see. Wang Wu, who was held in the air like a child by Yu, turned around and saw the dancer who stepped into the door. Fan, I haven't seen you for a long time, your figure is even better. Later, let sister examine your body. The dancer smiled gently. Okay, I'll examine you until you're satisfied. The last one to come in was the scholar in white who opened the space door. When she saw her, Wang Wu was the most surprised. A meow. Your descending brush like a spirit has improved again. Later, help me write a few words of money. The scholar sighed. I really want to write a row of words of shame for you. Chapter 666. At the table, the women were laughing and talking. Come and touch it, Fan's chest has really become bigger. And it's super bulky. You're so annoying, touch Yuyu's. Yuyu's is not fun. Her body has been refined, and a Wu has to wash it with a poisonous liquid before it can be used. Hey, someone wants the poisonous liquid? I have it here, do you want to apply it now? Tisk, don't drag me into your nonsense. By the way, Zhang Miao, don't you feel tired dressing as a man? Especially the flat area on your chest, it's so funny, big chest is not a bad thing. Eat your food, don't worry about me. Don't worry about my chest. As the only man at the table, listening to such a dialogue, Wang Lu really felt a little pressure, and at the same time, he was deeply puzzled. Where did these women come from? When did Wang Wu meet such a group of strange people? And their relationship is so close. Zen Master Guru was an old acquaintance. His braised dog meat was superb, and his Zen skill was also amazing. However, the last time they met on the Grand Cloud Mountain, she was just an incarnation of the King Pill, and her body was trying to break through the threshold of Yuanying and Huashan. After a few years, it seemed that she still hadn't crossed that step, but in the peak of Yuanying, her accumulation was getting deeper and deeper. That barbarian woman, Yujio of Song, had a terrifying body that Wang Lu had never seen before. Although she looked tall and fit, without those angular muscles. Although she only looked tall and fit without those angular muscles, how could Wang Lu not see the infinite destructive power hidden in her body at this time? In terms of pure physical strength, almost no one in the same realm could be her opponent. As for the witch doctor, a Wu, who was covered with bottles and jars and liked to be with the corpses, she mastered the long-lost primitive witchcraft. It was reasonable to say that after the end of the primitive era, the law of heaven and earth changed, and the primitive witchcraft was not only lost, but also ineffective, not to mention that the law changed after the era. However, this witch doctor did not seem to be affected by the rules, and some strange witchcraft was at his fingertips. The dancer Ji Lingfan and Wang Wu seemed to be the closest. Their relationship was even better than that between Qinyang and Wang Wu. As soon as she sat down, she sat next to Wang Wu without hesitation and pushed Wang Lu aside. Then, the two of them began to cuddle and flirt with each other. Many of their intimate actions were so intimate that even an adult like Wang Lu felt uncomfortable. Occasionally, he would catch a glimpse of her from the corner of his eye, and he felt that there was a mysterious rhythm to her every movement, and it was able to affect the laws of heaven and earth. Then there was the scholar named Zhang Miao. Although she was dressed as a man, it was still difficult to hide her elegant and beautiful style. However, what was more noteworthy was the ink brush in her hand, which could write into things. It seemed that she had mastered the way of writing and had great magical ability. Any one of these people, if placed in 9 regions, was enough to become a deterrent force. Moreover, their powerful strength far beyond their real stage would make them more eye-catching. However, except for Zen Master Guru, who became famous because of his irreconcilable enmity with the Beast Master School, the others were not well known. Even with Wang Lu's erudition, he could only call out the name of Yujio of Song, which was accidentally found in an inconspicuous miscellaneous book. The others, such as a Wu, Zhang Miao, and Ling Fan, were not recorded, as if they appeared out of thin air. However, they were really strong, and their relationship with Wang Wu was really good. For a long time, Wang Lu hadn't seen his master with such an undisguised happy smile. Although Wang Wu usually liked to smile, and the kind of smile was ever-changing, such as sinister smile, cheap smile, shameless smile, and rampant smile, it was rarely as carefree and sincere as it was now. In front of these friends, she seemed to be much more relaxed than when she was with Wang Lu. But then again, although there was a wonderful fate between the two of them that lasted for hundreds of years, the daily interaction between the two was basically to hurt each other. They had to be careful in every word and action, lest they fell into the pit that the other party carefully dug. It was really painful and happy at the same time. Although there was no lack of happiness, it was absolutely not relaxed. Therefore, when he saw Wang Wu's seemingly innocent smile, although Wang Lu had doubts, he didn't interfere. Everything was fine as long as Wang Wu was happy. Even if they only cared about their own conversation and left Wang Lu, Aya, and Lu Li out, Wang Lu didn't care. In any case, the two of them heard that there was a free meal to eat, so they were not qualified to complain that they couldn't get a word in. Moreover, they didn't have any friendship with Zhang Miao and the others. As long as they ate happily, everything was fine. Wang Lu's appetite was average, so he only took a bite of the beef eye that was closest to him. At this time, the nearby Aya sighed and said, "What a touching and sincere friendship. It reminds me of the time when I founded the Knights of the Round Table system, where there was no distinction between nobility and inferiority, no distinction between each other. What an ominous metaphor. I remember that not long after you founded the Knights of the Round Table, your country was destroyed, right? Aya was silent for a moment. Wang Lu, you're getting better and better at chatting. Thank you. After being hit by Wang Lu, Aya had nothing to say, so she began to drink to drown her sorrows. After 2 cups, her cheeks were somewhat red, and her eyes turned to Wang Wu and her friends. These friends of Wang Wu are really strong. Wang Lu nodded. If they're not strong, how could they be qualified to be friends with Wang Wu? Birds of a feather flock together. Wang Wu herself was not noble and elegant, in fact, she was the complete opposite of noble and elegant. However, if one didn't have some ability, it would be difficult to enter the eyes of Wang Wu, let alone be friends with her. Moreover, Zhang Miao, Yu Yu, and the others were powerful fighters that Wang Wu specially recruited for the grand competition, so it was natural that they were strong. No, I mean, they're really strong. Aya's tone was serious. Although they are limited by their respective stage and can't be as strong as a supreme, they have reached the limit in their respective fields. Just like Wang Wu, who has reached the limit of defense and survival. Hearing that Aya compared Yu Yu and the others with Wang Wu, Wang Lu could not help but be surprised. So powerful? Who was Wang Wu? At present, she was the only one in the Wanxian League who could steadily defeat Dixian in the arena. The name of the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions had long been spread throughout 9 regions. The absolute invincibility of King Pill and stage had become the consensus of hundreds of millions of cultivators. Some people even suspected that she had already deviated from the immortal path and entered the outer path, because according to the theory of immortal path, there was no such powerful King Pill in the world. But Yu Yu, Wu, Zhang Miao. These people could actually reach the level of Wang Wu. They may not be as powerful as Wang Wu, but they are undoubtedly at the same level. They have a lot of similarities, so I think the difference in strength is not too big. At this point, the sound of a waiter knocking on the door came from outside the private room, and a new wave of dishes were served one after another. When Aya saw the new dishes, her eyes immediately lit up like Lu Li's, and she completely lost interest in talking. When Wang Lu heard her words just now, he could not help but put down his chopsticks and fell into contemplation. The same level? These people have King Pill and Yuanying, but they were evaluated as the same level by Aya? This reminded him of what Wang Wu once said a long time ago. King Pill, Yuanying, deity. The emergence and division of these stages were just the exploration and summary of the path of immortal cultivation by the predecessors. However, the path of immortal cultivation was by no means unique. Now it seemed that Wang Wu had undoubtedly broken away from the pattern of the predecessors, and with the help of the legacy left by himself, she blazed a new path on the path of immortal cultivation. However, a miracle like Wang Wu could not be repeated. Even Wang Lu himself was not ready to follow her path, but rather prepared to reach Yuanying step by step. But now, Aya said that there were so many people like her. In the past 100 years, what Wang Wu had experienced had always been a mystery, and Wang Lu never asked out of respect. But now, he was really interested. 7th Madam, Yu Yu. These people could not be casually met anywhere. Now that he thought about it, Wang Wu's path of outside path might be inextricably linked to them. No wonder they only gathered them when he was in dire need of a strong fighter. Moreover, they seemed to be unwilling to do so. However, in any case, if they could really be as strong as Wang Wu, then with the addition of these new forces, the pressure in the next competition would be much less. Just as he thought of this, he suddenly saw that those reveling women had begun to play the drinking game, and then made a loud noise. The Drunken Immortal building was named after the Drunken Immortal, so the immortal wine in the building was naturally very powerful. Even the Night King Aya, whose strength was equivalent to that of a supreme, blushed after drinking a few cups. According to the standard of King Pill's Yuanying, perhaps one sip would be enough to make her drunk. Of course, 7th Madam and the others were not ordinary people, but after dozens of bottles of wine, they also began to be delirious. The tallest barbarian woman leisurely drank a jar of strong wine, then wiped her mouth, gave Wang Wu a wink, rushed to the scholar Zhang Miao, and pushed her to the ground. "Huh, Xiao Wu, help me hold Miao Miao down, I'm going to take off her clothes." Wang Wu was overjoyed. Okay, I also don't like her dressing as a man. She has big breasts, but she doesn't show them to me, and insists on entangling them. It's simply an evil act against the heaven. Zhang Miao was pushed down by the barbarian woman, and she was drunk, so she couldn't use her magical power. Seeing that the barbarian woman unceremoniously put her hand in front of her clothes, she was shocked and said, You two idiots, stop." Wang Wu smiled drunkenly and said, "If you stop at this time, are you still qualified to be a man? You are not a man." Ah. While speaking, Yu has unceremoniously pulled open her clothes, revealing the white skin under her neck, as well as the circle of breast-wrapping cloth. The nearby drunken dancer Ji Lingfan lightly covered her mouth and said with a smile, "Meow meow, you're actually wrapping your chest. You're so secretive even to your own sister, how disloyal. Come and let us see your true face." Zhang Miao's face turned red, and her pretty eyes were filled with tears. "You perverts, just you wait." Seeing this scene, Wang Lu realized that these several crazy women seemed to be serious. A relatively taciturn witch doctor had already gone to untie Zhang Miao's belt. He was actually interested in watching it, but thinking of the side effect after seeing it, Wang Lu still smiled and got up to leave. He also grabbed the reluctant Aya and Lu Li. Although they were women, they were, after all, outsiders. When the three of them went out, they heard a burst of cheers from inside the door. A certain handsome and charming scholar was probably done for. Chapter 667. In the residence of the chief planner of the organizing committee in Immortal 5 area, several birds were suddenly startled in the quiet courtyard. Through the lush trees, a miserable moan could be heard. My head hurts so much, water, I beg for water." In the bedroom, the famous number 1 king pill in 9 regions was now curled up on the bed in pain, holding his head. There was a thick and twisted smell of incense in the room, as if to cover something, which made it very strange. Hearing the groan in the room, the owner of the courtyard quickly rushed over, kicked the door open, and then covered his nose with his hand, but did not use the wind spell to clean up the smell in the room. "Hee, are you happy? Do you feel like you're floating in the air?" The woman in white on the bed curled up her body and said in pain, "I beg for water." Wang Lu pretended to be surprised and said, "Beg for water? Didn't you have a good time getting water yesterday? You forced Zhang Miao to the ground and used all kinds of unsightly means to squeeze the water from the other party's body. How come now it's your turn to be dehydrated? What the F***ck, are you done? I just want water, okay? Can't you be considerate and bring me a bowl of water?" My head hurts." Seeing that Wang Wu was boiling with anger and had a splitting headache, as well as many kinds of pain, Wang Lu nodded and said, "Okay, I'm coming." Then he raised both of his hands, and the 5 elements spell came out. A huge water ball condensed out of the void, floated above Wang Wu's head for a moment, and then fell down with a loud crashing sound, which was very chilling. The person on the bed was doused with clear water. With a scream, he sat up abruptly. And just as Wang Lu was ready to face her boiling anger and put the rouge tears in front of his body as a precaution. So cool, it's so much more comfortable. However, he heard Wang Wu let out a sigh of satisfaction, and then, completely ignoring that the bedding had been soaked, she lay back down again. Wang Lu looked up and down and saw that Wang Wu was completely soaked. Her white dress clung tightly to her body, revealing parts that shouldn't be exposed, but she didn't seem to care. He leisurely lay on the water bed, and after a while, his breathing gradually became longer. Wang Lu was shocked. How could he sleep like that? "Hey, did the water go straight into your head?" Wang Wu immediately scolded, "You traitorous disciple, you're the one who's out of your mind. Just now, I was really dehydrated." The after effects of this boiling blood wine are really not to be trifled with. When you're dehydrated, your primordial spirit is in a mess, and you can't even release your magic. Hee hee. Wang Lu sneered. I'll let you drink. It would be a huge loss if they didn't drink the alcohol that was reimbursed by public funds, right? Relying on the fact that you're the #1 king pill in 9 regions and that your non-phase golden body is immune to all poisons, you boast about your ability to control poison? You're holding 17 jars of heavenly immortal drunk wine and having a drinking contest with the barbarian girl Yu. You're even drinking the half-poisonous and half-wine boiling blood as plain water, aren't you? It's really unfair that you didn't die from the pain. However, non-phase golden body was, after all, non-phase golden body. According to Wang Wu's drinking method, even a supreme would have to lie down, but she only slept for a night and recovered. It could be seen that the heavenly Tao was indeed not a reliable thing. After resting for a moment, Wang Wu frowned. What's this strange smell? Your incense has expired, right? Hee hee. Seeing Wang Lu's attitude, Wang Wu slightly frowned. Her intuition told her that there must be a trap. However, the headache caused by the hangover had not been completely relieved, and her thinking was still a bit slow. Therefore, she subconsciously raised her hand and raised a breeze to blow open the window, trying to take away the suffocating fragrance in the room. As a result, when the breeze blew, the fragrance drifted away, leaving behind a dizzying smell of alcohol. Even if the breeze turned into a gale, it still couldn't be blown away. What's going on? Wang Lu sneered and said, this is 1,000-mile fragrance. Didn't you praise it for its strong and long smell when you drank it last night? Can it stay here? It can't be that amazing, right? Besides, there's only the smell of alcohol here, but no fragrance. Of course, the alcohol you spit out is not so fragrant. I vomited last night. Wang Lu sneered. It's not as simple as vomiting. You didn't do anything shameful, did you? Wang Lu raised his head and thought for a moment. With your degree of shame, it seems that there is nothing shameful. That's good. Wang Wu was relieved and asked, what about Xiao Qi and the others? They are more responsible. After waking up, they all went to work. Yu has a competition today. It will start on time in 4 hours. Do you want to watch it? Wang Wu sat up directly and snapped her fingers with her right hand. A red flame burned from her feet to her eyebrows. Her wet clothes evaporated in a flash. She looked radiant, quite like Murong Bingli. Of course. Wang Wu's attitude towards her good friend was surprisingly warm. After hearing that Yu Jiao of Song of the Barbarian tribe had a competition, she didn't care about her poor state at all. She stepped out of bed and looked energetic. Not long ago, Lu Li, the 6th elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall of the Lingjian School, was a substitute. He fought with the Dixian in formations and lost by a narrow margin. That competition was very popular. Many supreme elders of the Heavenly Sage Hall came to watch it, but Wang Wu didn't come. Moreover, she asked with confidence. Oh, old 6th level is just to die. I won't watch it. However, she was more active than anyone else in her friend's competition. Oh, by the way, have you bought all the cheering props? Have you prepared the fireworks, the salute, and the celebratory wine? Yu has to drink every time she wins. Otherwise, she will feel worse than losing. Listening to his master's enthusiastic nagging, Wang Lu couldn't help but be more curious about the origin of this group of people. Who exactly were they that could make Wang Wu worried to this point? In the past 150 years, Wang Wu should have been disheartened because of the death of the eldest brother. Why did she feel that she had a second spring because of these good friends? Of course, Wang Lu didn't force her to imitate a chaste woman. During the 150 years of absence, it was more important for her to be happy than anything else. But there should be a reason for her to be happy, right? The brothers of the Heavenly Sword Hall who shared life and death with her couldn't let her untie the knot in her heart. Why could these women from all over the world? Thinking about it all the way to the competition, Wang Lu didn't figure it out. She only felt that the identity of Qingyang, Yu, and others was more and more mysterious. The competition venue of Wuxia of Song was located in Tianyi District. Tianyi District was an independent world. It needed to pass through a special transmission array to travel with other areas. After crossing the transmission array, they saw a crater. The so-called ring-shaped mountain was literally a ring. It was a huge ring that reached the sky and the earth, with no end in sight. Its width was about 50 miles, and its diameter was about 100 miles. In the middle of the ring, an island with a circumference of 10 miles was floating alone in the middle of the ring. The venue of the competition was on that isolated island. The special terrain created a special venue. There was only one venue in Tianyi District, but because of the special nature of this place, it could bear the needs of multiple competitions. Today, the King Pill level King of Power competition was held here. The two participants were the barbarian woman Yu Jiao of Song, who represented the Wanxian League, and Du Xiaoxiao, who was known for his strength in diction. The name Du Xiaoxiao seemed to be enthusiastic and cheerful. It was easy to think of a smiling young man or girl. But in fact, Du Xiaoxiao was thin and short. He was expressionless, more like a dead person than a living person. It was in sharp contrast to his amazing explosive power. On the other hand, Du Xiaoxiao was an extremely serious and responsible person. When Wang Lu rushed to the auditorium with his master, Du Xiaoxiao had already arrived at the venue an hour in advance. Although this King of Power competition was a martial arts competition, it was a relatively weak one. Therefore, the venue was not large, only 1 square mile, and there was a flat white stone surface inside. Du Xiaoxiao sat cross-legged on the ground, wrapped himself in a black cloak, closed his eyes and said nothing. In this regard, there was soon a discussion in the auditorium. TSK, he can really pretend. He came here in advance to pose, to scare people? Forget it, don't say it. He has the capital to pretend. You haven't seen the previous game. Can he win today's game? It is said that Wang Lu came to watch in person. He should win. He won all the previous games that he went to watch. If Wang Lu is willing to go in person, would also bet on him to win. But who did he choose this time? Yu Jiao of Song? Inexplicable, I've never heard of her. Who cares? Since Wang Lu is optimistic about it, it's most likely not wrong. He is the chief planner, and he also participated in the development of the contestant list. Isn't he optimistic about the previous king of 10,000 beasts? This, half a month ago, in the Yuanying stage level King of Power competition, it was Du Xiaoxiao who easily overturned the king of 10,000 beasts of Beastmaster School. It was the combination of the king of 10,000 beasts and his spirit pet double-headed mammoth. His strength was so strong that there was almost no second person in the same stage. However, he lost in a mess and was even seriously injured due to the backlash. After witnessing that game, the originally complacent deity stage contestant, Taoist Master Qin Shan from Xingjing sect, immediately chose to postpone the game indefinitely. At present, the candidate was still in the emergency selection process. The King Pill level contestant was originally set to be Xingjing sect's Jianghu. Power King's true body was a rare top-level method, and it was even rarer that Jianghu could practice it to the Desheng stage in the King Pill level. Although everyone didn't expect him to win, they still held some hope. However, now it was replaced by a barbarian race female warrior named Yu Jiao of Song, which inevitably made people doubt. Before long, in the midst of people's doubts, the other side of the game finally appeared. Yu Jiao of Song was a tall and beautiful barbarian race woman. She was still wearing the animal skin clothes that she brought from her tribe. Her feet were bare on the ground, and her pace was neither fast nor slow, heavy and powerful. After the barbarian woman appeared, the discussion in the audience became louder. However, it was soon covered up by the crowd. It was overshadowed by an earth-shattering cheering. Yu, you're finally here. Wang Wu's voice was unusually loud, which even overshadowed the voices of many Yuanying and deity stage contestants in the audience, which made people fully aware of the true strength of the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions that was far beyond the stage. Then, salutes and fireworks soared into the sky from Wang Wu's hands, covering the sky with a radius of several miles with colorful light. The audience looked at the magnificent scene in the sky and was stunned. Wang Lu silently walked away, not wanting to be associated with such people. Wang Wu set off the fireworks, took out a bottle of wine, and waved it high. "I've prepared the wine. If we win, we won't go home until we're drunk." In the arena, Yu turned her head in surprise, and then showed a refreshing smile. "Okay." On the other side, Du Xiaoxiao, who had been sitting on the ground for a long time, suddenly stood up. Although his movement was light, the whole ground trembled. "Can we start?" Yu turned her head. "Come on." Chapter 668. With that said, the game officially began. Although there was still more than half an hour before the official agreed time, and many spectators had not yet had time to enter the arena, since both players were already in place, there was no need to waste time. After all, this was not a commercial game, and there was no need to accommodate the audience's feelings. The Mighty King's game was relatively low in terms of confrontation, and there was no need for fierce confrontation and killing. Both sides stood in their respective positions, and the arena would constantly produce heavy objects condensed from the essence of the earth and fall on the players' heads. The players needed to catch the heavy objects and maintain their standing posture, and the heavy objects would continue to superimpose over time. As long as they could hold on longer than the opponent, they would win. In the last game, the king of 10,000 beasts fought against Du Xiaoxiao. Starting from the initial weight of more than 1,000 kilograms of bluestones, he had persisted for half an hour. At that time, it was no longer bluestones that fell from the sky, but Kuan Yen, each of which weighed hundreds of millions of kilograms. The king of 10,000 beasts, under the pressure of hundreds of millions of kilograms, persisted for 3 breaths, and gradually became exhausted. Seeing that the opponent remained motionless, he had the intention to admit defeat. However, at this moment, Du Xiaoxiao looked up at the sky. Heavier. As a result, a pitch-black and round meteor fell from the void, carrying with it an incalculable impact force. Du Xiaoxiao raised one of his hands, like a pillar supporting the sky. The next moment, the meteor landed. Du Xiaoxiao's face remained unchanged, and his arm remained motionless, but there was a loud bang under his feet. The ground of the arena was reinforced by immortal methods, and could withstand a blow from Dixian without being damaged. Although the power of the meteor was strong, it was still limited to the Yuanying stage, and could not crack the ground. But it could make the ground deform strongly. The hard slate was like water, stirring up a ripple of several feet high, which could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. The king of 10,000 beasts bore the brunt. He only felt an irresistible force surging up under his feet, wanting to throw him into the sky, but the hundreds of millions of kilograms above him made him miserable. The two superimposed, and the king of 10,000 beasts was overturned on the spot. Under the huge crushing force, his tendons and bones were broken, and he almost died on the spot. On the other hand, Du Xiaoxiao held the heavenly fire meteor with one hand and waited for the flame to extinguish. Everyone found that the stone was not big, only the size of a fist, and it looked unremarkable in the palm of his hand. But soon they recognized that it was the Supreme Origin Stone, and each one was as heavy as a mountain. In the nascent soul state, Du Xiaoxiao could move mountains. And so on, under the King Pill realm, although his strength was reduced by more than 90%, it was still far beyond any King Pill in the world. Even the abnormal number 1 King Pill in 9 regions, Wang Wu, admitted that pure strength was not her forte, and she might not be able to defeat Du Xiaoxiao. Who else could do anything to him now? This barbarian woman from a remote tribe? Amidst everyone's anticipation, 2 square cyan stones slowly fell from the endless void. They were 1 inch square and weighed more than 500 kilograms. They were the products of highly condensed earth and stone, and were specially used for counterweights. Yu, who was slightly taller, was the first to catch the bluestone. Even though the weight of the bluestone fell into her hand, her arm did not move, and even the skin of her palm did not change, showing her unusually high physical strength. Du Xiaoxiao followed closely behind. His pale hand appeared from the black robe and picked up the blue stone. It was also an understatement, and there was no change in his skin. Although it was only the first round, the audience outside the arena had already begun to talk. Aren't these two people just King Pill realm? Yes, Yu Jiao of Song is obviously so. As for Du Xiaoxiao, it is said that he used the method of going back in time to bring his body back to the peak of King Pill realm, so there is no cheating problem. But they are so powerful. Although it's only 1,000 kilograms bluestone, to not even change the skin of his palm, I'm afraid the strength is really beyond the power King true body. Du Xiaoxiao was an ancient earth immortal and had mastered many ancient body refining methods that had been lost. Perhaps this Yu Jiao of Song has the special bloodline of the barbarian? 9 regions was vast. In some barren areas, in order to survive and multiply, there were many tribes that more or less had the bloodline of monsters, which was different from the magical power of mortals. In the arena, the two of them each held a blue stone, silently facing each other. A moment later, the second square stone fell from the sky. It was also 1 inch square, but its color was a bit deeper and its weight increased a bit. The two of them each took it, but they still remained motionless. After a while, the third stone fell, which was twice as heavy as the first one. Then came the fourth, the fifth. After a meal's time, each of them had more than 10 square stones in their hands. Although the weight of 100,000 kilograms was far from the load-bearing limit of the King Pill cultivator, it was impossible for a common King Pill cultivator to hang in the air with one arm for so long. Just like an ordinary adult man, he could lift a few dozen kilograms of weight, but it would be difficult to hang in the air with one arm, and it was impossible to maintain it for a meal's time. However, Yu Jiao of Song and Du Xiaoxiao each carried 100,000 kilograms of weight and remained motionless. Moreover, at this time, every stone that fell from the sky had already weighed more than tens of thousands of kilograms. Coupled with the impact of the fall, for a common Taoist master of the King Pill cultivator, it was already an effective blow. However, the two of them still steadily held it with their hands. Their potential was bottomless. However, if one looked closely, one could see the subtle differences between the two of them. Although Yu Jiao of Song didn't show any signs of fatigue, with the weight of 100,000 kilograms on her hand, one could see that the skin and flesh of her palm were sunken and her muscles were tense, indicating that she had used a lot of strength. However, Du Xiaoxiao played it down, and no change could be seen in his body. Is this guy really in the King Pill stage? How could there be such a powerful King Pill body? This guy is definitely cheating. How could the physical strength of a Jindan realm cultivator be so powerful? They claim to have used time reversal to regress the strength of their body to the King Pill stage, but who knows if they're holding back. Previously, they lost 3 rounds in a row in the hands of Wang Lu, so they simply don't want their face anymore? The audience in the audience raised their doubts in disbelief. Some people were even indignant and shouted abuse at Dixian. In this regard, the ancient Earth immortals who were also watching from the audience sneered and responded, "We have already recognized your number 1 Jindan in 9 regions, but now you're already cursing at him endlessly in this kind of situation?" Thus, the cultivators who raised their doubts were at a loss for words. In fact, everyone was well aware of the quality of Wang Wu's 9 regions number 1 King Pill stage. At least, the setting of the King Pill stage was very close to the edge. However, when Dixian lost to Wang Wu, they were indeed happy to admit it. Now, this Du Xiaoxiao obviously used a special way to enhance his strength, but as long as his body and magical power were indeed in the general sense of the King Pill stage, the Wanxian League could do nothing about it. Are we going to lose like this? In the audience, a strong spectator clenched his fists rather unwillingly, wishing that he could pour his strength into the field to help Yu Jiao of Song. That was Jianghu, who was replaced by Yu Jiao of Song before the match, and now could only sit in the audience. However, he was not dissatisfied at all, because he had seen the match with his own eyes. He was very sure that if he were to go up there, he would be close to his limit and could no longer compete with the opponent. The power of Yu Jiao of Song was far above him, but the problem was, it seemed that she still couldn't win. When the next stone fell, Yu Jiao of Song's arm had already swayed slightly, while Du Xiaoxiao was still motionless. The gap had become more and more obvious. I can only pray that the barbarian woman has long endurance and can wear down the opponent. Jianghu gritted his teeth, but in his heart, he knew that this guess was unlikely to come true. Although the King of Strength competition also tested endurance, as the weight of the falling stone continued to increase, after all, the advantage of strength was the most important. Do something, barbarian woman. You're the reinforcement sent by Wang Lu, you can't just lose like this, right? And at this time, the field really ushered in a change. Yu Jiu of Song, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened her mouth. Ah, it's really boring to wait like this. Thinking of Xiao Wu's wine, my saliva almost flowed out. Why don't we speed up the pace a bit and end it earlier? Upon hearing this, Du Xiaoxiao glanced at her and then revealed a sneer. Sure. However, the next moment, before he could open his mouth to make a request, he saw Yu loudly said, "Give me the supreme original stone." Du Xiaoxiao was stunned at first, and then he showed an incredible expression of shock. He quickly looked up and wanted to speak, but it was still a bit late. In the pitch-black sky, a blazing meteor tore through the darkness and crashed down. It was the supreme original stone that allowed Du Xiaoxiao to defeat the King of Beasts half a month ago. It was enough to make the King of Beasts at the peak of Yuanying stage tremble. At the same time, Yu Jiu of Song roared. Her delicate face showed a ferocious look, and her two clear eyes swelled into a blood-red color. Immediately, there was a burst of dense bone-stretching sounds in the barbarian woman's body, like firecrackers set off during the new year, but the sound was thousands of times louder. Circles of sound waves visible to the naked eye spread out with her body as the center. The barbarian woman's figure suddenly elongated, and all the muscles of her body swelled up. In the blink of an eye, she became a monster giant with a height of more than 10 feet. Oh! Yu transformed into a giant form, and it seemed that even her reason had gone away. She exerted force in her right hand, and more than a dozen highly condensed boulders were squeezed into a ball by her palm. Then she raised her arm and faced the falling supreme original stone. Boom! The loud sound of the falling supreme original stone was deafening, and the huge impact spread along her arm to the barbarian woman's whole body. Yu Jiu of Song trembled all over, and red blood oozed from time to time from her swollen muscles and skin. The bones of her arm were constantly broken, and it seemed that they were about to break. So, her left hand, which had been idle for a long time, suddenly lifted it up, and the two hands worked together to finally support it. This supreme original stone, which even a peak Yuanying stage expert was terrified of, was really caught by her. However, before the audience had time to be surprised and cheer for this, they saw a wave of terrain change blooming from under her feet. In an instant, it rose to more than 10 feet high, like a raging sea wave pressing down on Du Xiaoxiao. Du Xiaoxiao's complexion changed dramatically, but there was nothing he could do. The next moment, a huge force surged under his feet, and Du Xiaoxiao let out a muffled groan. He seemed to be unable to suppress the upward force and was lifted into the air. When his feet left the ground, the temperament of his whole body also changed. The original temperament of an immovable mountain was swept away, and he became depressed. After a while, blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. Yu Jiu of Song still maintained the form of a giant, and her hands joined together to barely hold the supreme original stone. She smiled at Du Xiaoxiao and said, "Next, it's your turn." Du Xiaoxiao was silent for a long time. "You already saw it?" Yu laughed wildly and said, "Of course I didn't see it, but don't forget who I am with. Wang Lu has already told me about your trick of stepping on the ground and borrowing strength to fight. As long as you are cut off from the ground, you will lose. Well, I admit defeat." After Du Xiaoxiao finished speaking, he reached out and threw more than a dozen square stones to the ground. The stones fell to the ground and made a series of muffled sounds. Du Xiaoxiao's right hand was trembling. Obviously, he had already lost his strength. After admitting defeat, Du Xiaoxiao raised his arm, and the black cloak rolled up and disappeared without a trace. Yu put down the stone and sighed. Her figure shrank rapidly, covered in blood, and involuntarily fell backward. But before she fell to the ground, a slender arm had already supported her. Wang Wu held Yu Yu in one hand and a wine pot in the other, and entered the arena. Chapter 669. Yu Yu, you're too soft-hearted. Such a good opportunity, yet you can't bear to do it. What else can people say about you? You really deserve to be poor. In the Drunken Immortal building in Human 5 area, Wang Wu's voice revealed a bit of blame, but it was more of a drunken haze. Yu Jiu of Song, who was drinking with Wang Wu, said helplessly, "How could you be so ruthless? The fixed price is 50 million spirit stones, and our tribe's annual expenses are only a few thousand spirit stones. Oh, counting the broadcast audience, you're advertising Wang Lu in front of millions of people in the City of Immortals, so what's the big deal about 50 million spirit stones? You don't know how many resources he has now. He can only give us 2 or 3 of them, and then he can live a luxurious life every day. Isn't it not good to be such a blatant corruption? It's rare to be a leader, but he's not corrupt. This is an insult to the entire leadership class. That's really not good." Wang Wu hatefully said, "Yu Yu, you've been a barbarian girl in the Gobi Desert for so many years that your brain has been blown silly by the wind and sand. Not to mention anything else, at least you shouldn't let Wang Lu take such a big advantage of you. His 4 consecutive victories, especially your unexpected victory, have made his reputation soar again. Now, in Area A and B of the City of Immortals, there has been a cult that worships Wang Lu, and it will soon merge with his wisdom sect. That's a good human-shaped gold mine. I don't know how much he's earned from this alone, so what if you want him to give you tens of millions of spirit stones?" Yu Yu still hesitated. "But I'm not taking advantage of him. Wang Lu did tell me that I can use that trick to break the other party's cheating. Otherwise, if I really have to compete with Du Xiaoxiao in strength, I'd lose." With that, Yu Yu somewhat indignantly said, "That guy is also cunning. His feet are connected to the earth, and he borrows the power of the whole world in Heaven 1 area. As long as his feet don't leave the ground, his power is infinite. Only they could come up with this kind of rogue trick." Wang Wu said, "The design of the entire City of Immortals was given by the Wuxia League, and Dixian was meticulous in its implementation. The specific plan for the King of Power competition had also been discussed and approved by both sides. They had not expected that there might be a hidden trap in the Tianyi district. They could only blame the incompetence of the Wuxia League. What's more, Du Xiaoxiao's bloodline contained the bloodline of the rock beast. Absorbing the power of the earth was an instinct, so it was not cheating. To be honest, after witnessing the tragic defeat of the King of 10,000 Beasts, few people could guess Du Xiaoxiao's real trump card. They really thought that his physical strength was infinite. I can only say that the intelligence of the Wuxia League is hopeless." Yo-Yo was curious. "Isn't Wang Lu in charge of the Wuxia League? He is both a planner and a player, so how could he have time to take care of everything? Not to mention that some people in the Heavenly Sage Hall of the Wuxia League have always questioned the power of his little king pill. They need someone to check and balance it to ensure that the grand competition is foolproof. Humph, the result is like this. They are brainless and still want to fight for power with Wang Lu. They don't want to lose the grand competition. Wang Lu can rely on his own talent to mix in the Dixian camp like a fish in water. What good end would that group of pure bureaucrats have?" Yo-Yo said, "I don't understand what you said. There has never been such a troublesome thing in the tribe. In any case, I'm just here to help you participate in the competition. I just need to win all the matches that I can win." "When is the next match?" Wang Wu said, "It's still early. In the next few days, Shao Qi and Miao Miao will be the main players. You should rest assured and recuperate first. Really, why bother to break your tendons and bones and lose a lot of qi and blood just for a match? For this, 50 million from Wang Lu is really not much at all." Yo-Yo smiled foolishly and said, "I'm injured, but it's enough to have a victory in return. You, this barbarian girl, are really hopeless." Wang Wu hated iron for not becoming steel. But it doesn't matter, I can be your agent. As long as you let go of the authorization, I will help you manage everything in an orderly manner. Facing Wang Wu's sparkling eyes, she looked around and said, speaking of which, where is a Wu? She's picking herbs for you in the 100-herb garden. The barbarian girl was so frightened that she jumped up from the table. A Wu picking herbs for me? Could it be that she didn't need it anymore? This is a small injury, I can drink some wine and it'll be all right. There's no need to trouble a Wu at all. Please, when you say that, can you let go of your left hand that is covering the wound? With the cultivation base of King Pill stage, the tyrant body collapsed after receiving the Great Supreme Original Stone. This kind of injury can be cured by drinking some wine, unless it's that a drunken 3 lives that reverses the cycle of life and death. Your desolate tyrant body is unparalleled in the world, but once the tyrant body collapses, it will be particularly troublesome. Right now, except for a Wu, few people in 9 regions can properly take care of it. With a bitter face, Yo-Yo said, but a Wu's medicine is too scary. Every time, it's disgusting. As soon as her voice fell, she heard a cold voice behind her. Is that so? My medicine is disgusting? With a thud, Yo-Yo fell down from the chair. She turned her head with a pale face and a trembling voice. A Wu? Yes, it's me. The witch doctor nodded coldly, and a row of snow-white skulls on her waist made a slight collision sound with the trembling of her body. I was just joking, A Wu said, whether it's a joke or not, I can tell. Do you think my medicine is disgusting? It doesn't matter, I don't mind. It's just because you lack the basic aesthetic of medicine. As long as you take more, it will naturally improve. So, in the next course of treatment, double the amount of medicine. A Wu, what? Twice is not enough? Then 3 times is also fine. That's enough, that's enough. Double is enough. I will take the medicine on time, A Wu, please be merciful. While Yo-Yo and A Wu were in a love-hate relationship, Wang Lu was ushering in a new peak in his career. For consecutive victories in the competition had made him initially establish an almost superstitious belief in people's hearts. As long as Wang Lu made his move, victory would naturally come. Therefore, people often prayed for Wang Lu's blessing before doing anything, wishing themselves victory. At first, it was the contestants who participated in the grand competition who did this, and soon this habit spread through the contestants to the major sections. In just a few days, it had become a fashion. From seeking victory in the grand competition to treating infertility, people worshipped the statue of Wang Lu at home and prayed for blessings. This was the phenomenon that Wang Wu referred to as the cult of Wang Lu. In this regard, Wang Lu was happy to see it. If this cult of faith could be used well, it would be very beneficial to the grand competition. Not to mention the effect of appeasing the people's hearts and stabilizing the rear. For the people on the field alone, there would be a world of difference in the strength of a person with the belief of victory and a person who was uneasy. With his several successive victories, although the union of 10,000 immortals was still seriously behind in points, people's confidence had gradually recovered. They were no longer as frightened as they were in the first month, where they immediately lost 70 to 80% of their morale, which could not be boosted by the cheerleaders. When Yo-Yo defeated Du Xiaoxiao, although the Wanxian League side still lost more than they won, many of the lost matches had become a bit better. Many of them were lost by a narrow margin, which made people completely see the hope of victory. And when Wang Lu participated in the 5th match, this hope was completely ignited. He had participated in a little-known small competition. The content of the competition was to plant spirit grass, Yuanying stage. The leader of Giant Tree School and the Wanxian League against Green Immortal Chenggung. Before that, these 2 people were just strangers to most people, and Wang Lu had never dealt with them. At the beginning of the competition, the leader of Giant Tree School was 1 step behind, and he fell further and further away from victory. But halfway through the competition, Wang Lu floated in and sat in the audience. This time, Wang Lu did not say a word, and did not even look at him. He just watched silently. But when he realized that Wang Lu was behind him, the leader of Giant Tree School's morale was greatly boosted, and his amazing potential burst out. With the cultivation of peak Yuanying stage, he cultivated the 7 spirit grass in just 4 hours, which was even faster than Green Immortal Chenggung. And after the competition, the leader of Giant Tree School directly advanced to the soul formation stage, breaking through the bottleneck of many years. This competition pushed the legend of Wang Lu to the peak. If the victory of the first 4 matches was related to Wang Lu's strategy and planning, then in this match, Wang Lu completely reversed the victory with his own aura, which made people somewhat convinced of the teachings of Wang Lu's cult. At the same time, the Wanxian League also ushered in a more morale-boosting game. Zhang Miao won against Fairy Luo Shui in the calligraphy and painting competition. This was the first time since Supreme Tianluan that the Wanxian League had won against Fairy Luo Shui. As a Dixian who was proficient in all kinds of arts, Fairy Luo Shui's attainments in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting were almost unparalleled. How many famous masters in the Wanxian League were defeated in front of her? Even Supreme Tianluan's victory in the 90 game of Go was due to Tianluan's terrifying calculation capacity. In terms of Go itself, he was actually not as good as Luo Shui. However, Zhang Miao won this game to her heart's content. After a splash ink landscape painting, the green mountains and clear waters were vividly displayed on the paper. The audience could even smell the freshness of the mountains and hear the gurgling of the stream. Such a vision made Fairy Luo Shui immediately stop her brush and look at Zhang Miao's painting in a daze, feeling lost. After a long time, she burned her painting of Shanxue. Such a crushing victory made the audience feel very happy. Although Zhang Miao was unknown before, after this game, she became famous in 9 regions. Zhang Miao's victory was also the first 3 consecutive victories in the Wanxian League since Yu Yu defeated Du Xiaoxiao, which was of great significance. At the same time, from this game, the Wanxian League finally gradually caught up with the Dixian in terms of points, and the gap between the 2 sides became smaller and smaller. After Zhang Miao, the person who represented the Wanxian League was 7th Madam. She competed with the Food Immortal and cooking skills in the Drunken Immortal restaurant and finally won with a braised dog meat dish that made the foothold of the Food Immortal unstable. Although the Food Immortal himself was not very proficient in cooking, the Dixian who resuscitated from the Tomb of Immortals happened to not be good at cooking. The culinary skills of the people who had reached the pinnacle in food tasting were by no means comparable to ordinary people. The gold content of this game was not low, not to mention that this was the 4th consecutive win in the Wanxian League. After the 4th consecutive win was the 5th consecutive win. In the King Pill level poison fight, the witch doctor, Wu, defeated the little poison immortal with the 7-tailed insect. What was even more rare was that she destroyed the little poison immortal's King Pill incarnation on the spot and traced back the source to hurt his body. She avenged the tragic death of Senior Red Blood Poison in the past. The 5 consecutive wins in 3 days made the Wanxian League seethe, but for the first time, the Dixian League fell into silence. In the face of the sudden 5 consecutive defeats, whether it was the leader Xian Mo or the consistent opponent Bai Zhe, both were somewhat speechless. However, at this time, Wang Lu struck while the iron was hot and finally threw down the most important chip, which was a letter of challenge to the other party. 2 days later, in Immortal 1 area, in the King Pill level challenge, I will lead the team to wait for you. Chapter 670. It had been more than 2 months since the start of the grand competition. However, there were only a handful of matches that were of real weight. For example, the most valuable one-on-one battles had yet to be held in its entirety. The reason was very simple. The Wanxian League side had no confidence in winning at all. The rule of the complete one-on-one fight was to win 3 out of 5 matches. Each side would send out 5 people to fight one by one. The first to win 3 matches would be the winner. After such a complete match, the score would be 500 points, which was equivalent to more than 10 matches in general, which was very important. However, in the Wanxian League, whether it was in King Pill level, Yuanying stage, Deity stage, or Supreme stage, it was difficult to find more than 5 people who could be compared with Dixian. Take the Supreme stage as an example. At the start of the grand competition, Hichu Daoren and Xian Mo had a big fight in Immortal 1 area. Although he too won that fight, people with discerning eyes could see that the other side gave up the victory. In terms of pure strength, Xian Mo, who could easily divide the chaos and put yin and yang on one side, was obviously above He. Tuesday Hichu Daoran was the number one person in 9 regions, but Xian Mo was by no means the number one person in Dixian. The gap between the two sides in terms of fighting was clear at a glance. The only one who could win was the number one King Pil in 9 regions in Lingjian School. However, there was only one King Pil in 9 regions. In addition, even her disciple, the famous Taoist master Wang Lu, did not have the confidence to win against Dixian in terms of strength. In fact, in the warm-up match before the start of the grand competition, Wang Lu fought against Bai Zhe. Although he was not at a disadvantage, in the end, he did not win. If even Wang Lu could not win, it would be difficult for anyone in King Pil and 9 regions to win. Currently, the most famous and powerful people under the King Pil stage were Qiong Hua, Zhu Shiyao, Xiang Liang, Zhang Zai, Lu Li. Their strength was on the same level as Wang Lu. According to the ranking system of the Wanxian League, these people, as well as some of the veteran King Pil disciples in other sects, were all classified as special level, which was the strongest level in the King Pil realm. Based on Wang Lu's bonus calculation, his own strength would be above +10. If his equipment, items, and other factors were taken into account, his overall combat strength could even reach +15 and above. He would definitely be able to challenge those of a higher level. However, it was clear that even the special grade King Pil was powerless against Dixian. According to the calculation of Supreme Tian Luan and Feng Yin Daoist Master, in the battle between King Pil and Yuanying stage, it was necessary to have at least +20 strength to be able to eat Dixian. However, how many people could achieve such an exaggerated value? Below the King Pil stage, there might be various methods, such as super powerful magical weapon, overbearing medicinal pill, or immortal level bestowment method, to create a +20 abnormal warrior. However, once the King Pil was condensed, the strength of the cultivator would become more and more difficult to achieve. At present, in the Wanxian League, only Wang Wu could have more than +20 strength. Her real strength was at least +30, which completely shattered the common sense. And if Wang Lu's state could reach the peak of the King Pil stage, he could also have a +18 strength, which could be regarded as having a fighting chance in the competition, and the odds of winning could be about 50%. In addition, after the end of the training, Qiong Hua and Zhu Shiyao each had about +17 strength, so their odds of winning were about 30%. As for the others, they were even weaker, with less than 10% odds of winning. According to the best of 5, the overall winning rate of the Wanxian League was less than 20%, which was not a number worth taking a risk on. According to people's expectations, it was likely that Wang Lu would have to wait until these people had enough time to train in Royal Soldier Sect and improve their fighting power to an average of +18. Only then would he have the value to fight. However, Wang Lu seemed to be impatient. When most people had not yet completed the full set of training, he resolutely issued a challenge to Dixian. 2 days later, in the arena of Immortal 1 area, the King Pil level challenge. The news of the challenge quickly spread in the City of Immortals. Thus, before the fever brought by the 5 consecutive victories faded, a new upsurge swept over. Various areas of the City of Immortals began to discuss the match, as if it could determine the outcome of the whole grand competition. Wang Lu is in such a hurry, could it be that he has a new card that can guarantee his victory? I remember it in the newspaper that the original plan of Daoist Master Wang Lu was to delay for at least a few months so that those Yuanying stage King Pil cultivators would have enough fighting power. Humph, don't you understand? I'm afraid Wang Lu doesn't need those people in Royal Soldier Sect anymore. The friends summoned by Daoist Master Nanfei's are all invincible characters in the same stage. With them, I'm afraid Wang Lu won't even have the chance to fight. That's right. That barbarian woman Jiao of Song can withstand the supreme original stone with her body. With this kind of divine power, she is simply invincible in the King Pil stage. With one punch, no matter how many magical abilities the opponent has, no matter how strong their immortal method is, they would still be crushed to pieces. There's also a Wu, the witch doctor of the Age of Desolation. That seven-tailed insect is invisible and colorless, yet it can make little poison immortal have a nosebleed. If it's someone else, wouldn't they turn into meat paste in an instant? So, aren't we going to win for sure? Humph, if there's no certainty of victory, why would Daoist Master Wang Lu make a move? As long as he makes a move, when did he not return victorious? At the same time, the Dixian people were also discussing the King Pill stage challenge. It seems that Wang Lu's acrobatic performance is finally over. The Dixian Baizé held the tactics written by Wang Lu and sneered, "He's exhausted his limited abilities." Before his voice fell, a fat Dixian couldn't help but say with a smile, "Baizé, you're used to saying ironic words, aren't you? He has just won 5 games in a row and beat us until we don't have any temper, but when it comes to you, he's exhausted his limited abilities?" With that, as if by magic, he pulled out a steaming roasted pig's leg out of thin air and took a big bite. The big grin that reached his ears and the bold and unrestrained manner of eating, if not the food immortal, who else could it be? "Oh, you damn fatty, you actually have the face to say that to me? Up until now, you have lost all the games you have participated in. The face of our Dixian is going to be thrown away by you." The food immortal's mouth, in addition to eating, also knows how to talk. Hearing this, he sneered and retorted, "If you want to talk about losing face, in the warm-up match, you were played like a fool by that kid Wang Lu in front of everyone's eyes. It's more shameful than me." "Enough, don't quarrel." A woman came forward in time and stopped the quarrel. Hearing her words, the food immortal and Baizé suddenly stopped talking. Because the person who spoke was the current nominal leader of the Dixian team, Xian Mo, who was also the initiator of this gathering. Xian Mo said, "Baizé is right. Wang Lu's letter of challenge shows that he has run out of tricks. 5 consecutive wins are actually not worth such a big fanfare. Compared with the more than 20 consecutive defeats in the Wuxia League, this 5-game winning streak is not worth mentioning at all. Right now, the fanaticism in the City of Immortals is completely instigated by Wang Lu. But if he really has enough cards, he can make the winning streak more." After a mere 5-game winning streak, he personally came down to the field, which can only mean that he doesn't have the confidence to continue to win. With that, Xian Mo looked at his companions around him. Everyone had different expressions. Most people believed her explanation, but there were also a few people who had doubts. For example, the food immortal, who was full of doubts while gnawing on the pig's leg. Thus, Xian Mo further explained, in those 5 victories, the sect leader of Giant Tree School defeated Shingung because when Shingung saw Wang Lu enter the field, he was in a trance and missed the winning opportunity, which was an accidental mistake. In the other 4 games, Wang Lu relied on the power of those outside path cultivators, not his own ability in the Wuxia League. Those outside path cultivators are indeed very powerful, but after all, there are only a few of them, and they have basically all been on the field. Apart from them, Wang Lu can't come up with any other way at all. That's why he threw out the letter of challenge at this time, trying to gain morale advantage with his 5-game winning streak, and then win this key King Pill battle. Think about it, if he really has confidence in his team, why would he have to work so hard to build momentum? After listening to this, the food immortal nodded, "Well, I'll take what you said as reasonable." After he finished speaking, he sucked clean the few strands of meat on the leg bone, then casually asked, "But on the other hand, if you really have the confidence to say that we will win this Golden Core competition without a doubt, then why do you need to gather all of us here?" During the previous few months of the competition, our participants all followed the schedule given by the Wuxia League. Each of us competed with each other, and we rarely met each other, because there was no need to say much, and there was no need to explain so much just for someone else's 5-game winning streak. When Xian Mo heard this, his eyes suddenly sharpened. "Bai Ling, what do you want to say?" The food immortal licked his greasy fingers and said faintly, "Probably because I lost too much. Sometimes I will inevitably think too much. For example, I'm thinking now, that day when I went to the Human 5 area to participate in the food tasting competition, if I wasn't so confident, if I could be a little more careful before the competition. How could I lose? The same truth actually applies to all of you, it's just that you're lucky that you didn't meet Wang Lu. And this time, Wang Lu took the initiative to challenge us, clearly showing that he has the confidence to win. But we're here saying that he has exhausted his limited abilities. It's simply more stupid than I was at the beginning. The food immortal shook his head, not to mention anything else. If this king pill battle, the Wanxian League arranges the lineup of Wang Wu, the barbarian woman, and the witch doctor, as long as 3 people are enough to win the game. I don't see any chance of winning on our side. After the food immortal finished speaking, all the Dixian people were silent. Because many of them had seen the performance of Yujio of Song and the witch doctor A Wu. In the king pill stage, they received the supreme primordial stone, and the 7-tailed insect broke little poison immortal's myriad poison invulnerability. Their strength was clearly at the same level as Wang Wu, and they were the outstanding generation of the outside path. In the case of limiting the realm, even the Dixian people would find it difficult to win. However, at this moment, a voice came in. If Wang Lu really arranges such a lineup, we will definitely win this battle. The person who spoke was dressed in black, the self-proclaimed sinner, and the true leader of the Dixian people, Black. Chapter 671. Sure to win? Hearing Black's statement, Food Immortal Bai Ling was quite puzzled. Not to mention Wang Wu, the barbarian woman and the witch doctor were all top figures in the outside path, and their strength could not be judged by the realm of immortal cultivation base that they showed. If the Dixian could go all out to fight, they would naturally not be afraid, but limited to the realm of King Pill. Not to mention the Dixian, even if a true immortal descended to the world, he would still be no match for them. Could it be that Black, who had repeatedly created miracles, was going to personally take action? But in that case, it would only be the Dixian side overwhelming the other side with strength, which seemed quite different from what he wanted to express. In this regard, Black simply explained, those outside path cultivators are unconventional, but they have a unique specialty. As long as they are targeted a little, they can win. For example, against the barbarian woman, as long as they bring out their virtual body, what can they do even if they have great brute force? Remember, outside path cultivators don't mean that they are invincible. Except for Wang Wu, the rest are nothing to worry about. With that, Dixian and Black pondered for a moment, then said. However, Wang Lu should also be clear about this. He has no reason to walk into the trap. Xian Mo said, but if he doesn't send these outside path cultivators, he has no one to use at all? Do you want to send those people who were trained in the Royal Soldier Mountain? Black shook his head. It's too late. In just a few months, they haven't formed a climate yet. Even with the help of medicinal pills, it's not enough. If you really want them to fight, it would make sense to wait at least 2 months. Wang Lu shouldn't issue the challenge so early. Xian Mo said, but if he waits for another 2 months, the 5 consecutive victories he painstakingly created will become worthless. Well, Wang Lu really has no way to continue his winning streak. The huge gap in strength between our 2 sides is not so easy to bridge. Biechen, what do you think? Lu Biechen, who was also known as Swan Xian, said, someone on the other side has deceived heaven's will. I can't predict it for you, but if I calculate it from the ground, we have an 80% chance of winning this battle. I can't see any traps. The black-clad Dixian closed his eyes in contemplation and then said softly, if the heaven wants to ask the heaven, then the earth wants to ask the 9 regions. It stands to reason that we, who are named Dixian, are the beloved children of 9 regions, so the result of the earth's calculation should not be wrong. However, being spoiled and arrogant has always been the road to defeat, not to mention that the 9 regions' spoiled child is not just us. If I remember correctly, since 50 years ago, peerless geniuses have emerged endlessly in the 9 regions. Lu Biechen said, I have also calculated this point, so I used the human divination technique to calculate it again. What was the result? We will win, Lu Biechen said firmly. We will definitely win. At the same time, in the Immortal 4 area, above the white clouds, a towering palace overlooked all living beings. In the main hall, 2 cultivators sat on both sides of a slightly unique chessboard, concentrating on the changes on the chessboard and talking softly from time to time. Fellow Daoist Tianluan, can you see the significance of Wang Lu's chess move? Fellow Daoist He2, you must be joking. No one has ever seen through Wang Lu's chess move. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people who have fallen into his hands over the years. With that, Supreme Tianluan moved the chess piece on the chessboard, which made Hichu Daoran slightly frown. If even you can't see through it, then Wang Lu's chess move is really intriguing. After a moment of silence, he too asked again, can't you see through him even in the mortal world? Supreme Tianluan shook his head and said, the mortal world is the calculation of all living beings. Cultivators go to the mortal world to get closer to the immortal path, let alone Wang Lu, the chosen one. Just like your sex Qianghua, 10,000 art sex Zhan Zai. These people are no longer in the mortal world. Hichu Daoran moved the chess piece again and said, both the sky and the earth are mortal worlds. Before ascending, no one can really jump out of this cage. If fellow Daoist Tianluan's calculation of the mortal world hasn't reached the great accomplishment realm, then your words just now would be somewhat convincing, but now it sounds a bit evasive. When Supreme Tianluan heard this, he smiled and also reached out to the chessboard and said, sure enough, I can't hide it from fellow Daoist He Tuesday. After reaching the great accomplishment realm, I can indeed even calculate cultivators. Not to mention juniors like Qianghua and Zai, I can even calculate the fate of supreme cultivators. Although it's hazy, I can still see the leopard through it. It's just that I have to ask fellow Daoists to keep this a secret from me, otherwise, I'm afraid it will cause unnecessary misunderstanding. In addition, from the beginning to the end, I still can't see through Wang Lu. It's as if he doesn't belong to this world from the beginning. Hichu Daoran was silent for a long time and said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Oh. Fellow Daoist he too has a lot of trust in Wang Lu. Even the people of Lingjian school believe in him, so why should I question him out of thin air? Since he doesn't belong to this world, he doesn't need to be limited by this world. It's just that this time, Wang Lu's move seems to be too dangerous. Supreme Tianluan said, wealth comes from danger. Wang Lu has always believed in this. What's more, this time, he has bet his own chips on the gambling table, so we have no reason to stop him. With that, Supreme Tianluan moved the chess piece again. However, Hichu Daoran had obviously fallen into an extremely disadvantageous situation. His two long eyebrows were almost twisted together. It's because he has bet his own chips that I'm a bit hesitant. If he's worried that he won't be trusted, so he arranged such a lineup, then it's really unnecessary. This is a major event related to the whole of 9 regions. No one has a reason to be alone. If he needs the support of other sects, we should spare no effort. There's no need to let Lingjian school take such a big risk. Supreme Tianluan said with a smile, fellow Daoist worries too much. Right now, even the mortals in the city of immortals know that Wang Lu is the godson of Supreme He too, so he can do whatever he wants. Speaking to this, Hichu Daoran could not help but laugh and said, it seems that Wang Lu has his own considerations. In that case, I won't meddle anymore and just wait and see. Supreme Tianluan also nodded and said, although my worldly calculation can't calculate the future of Wang Lu, if I try to calculate the people around him, we will definitely win. With that, Supreme Tianluan threw the die in his hand, and a 6-point appeared on the chessboard. Supreme Tianluan chuckled and moved the chess piece in his hand forward by 6 squares. Fellow Daoist, it seems that I have won this game. My 4 flying messengers have returned to the spring. Hichu Daoran shook his head helplessly and said, fellow Daoist Tianluan is really good at flying chess. One day later, the list of players in the Wanxian League was officially announced. As the most watched game since the start of the grand competition, this King Pill level game was also particularly solemn. This Jindan stage duel was also particularly solemn. The schedule was announced 3 days in advance, and the list of contestants was announced 2 days in advance. This was a treatment that had never been enjoyed in the previous hundreds of matches. However, at this time, after seeing the list of players set by the Wanxian League, many people in the City of Immortals were shocked. Is Wang Lu crazy? After 5 consecutive wins, did he start to underestimate the enemy? He doesn't put his opponent in his eyes at all. Putting out such a lineup. Does he want to make his Lingjian school famous? Be careful not to burn yourself by playing with fire. Even many of Wang Lu's diehard fans, after seeing the list, could not help but question Wang Lu's decision. Because the content of the list was indeed unexpected. Wang Wu, Lu Li, Quan Zouhua, Zhu Shiyao, Wang Lu. This was the entire content of the list. All of them were from Lingjian school. The master and disciple of non-phase on the list were expected. Wang Wu had won against Mirage Boy 2 months ago and won an unquestionable victory, so there was no need to compete this time. Wang Lu, on the other hand, had always played the role of a third party or a bystander in the previous 5 consecutive wins. This time, he finally played in person, which was expected. But what about the remaining 3 people? Zhu Shiyao and Lu Li had a good reputation in 9 regions, and this time, they were listed as Special King Pill. However, in the end, they were still immature. In terms of pure strength, they were far from the best choice in King Pill realm, whether it was Jianghu who held the Kill Immortal sword or the veteran King Pill powerhouses from some high-rank sects. They were more suitable than them for this kind of challenge beyond the limit. Moreover, even if they really had amazing qualifications and could break out far beyond their normal fighting power, they should at least wait until they finished their training in Royal Soldier Sect. It was too early for them to go on stage now. As for Quan Zouhua, it was more like a joke. Even the dog was sent on stage. Was this insulting the opponent or insulting themselves? If this list was a joke, it must be the worst joke since the grand competition began. However, when people realized that Wang Lu really set this list as the final result, they would rather it was just a joke. The casinos opened in various areas such as A and B were also greatly shaken on this day. The odds of Wang Lu winning in the King Pill battle had risen sharply. It could be seen that many brain-dead fans were very rational about their own wallets in addition to fanaticism. Unlike the inexplicable surprise of the Wanxian League side, the Dixian side was surprisingly dignified. Xian Mo once again organized a meeting and gathered many of his companions to discuss countermeasures. Because this move of Wang Lu even exceeded the calculation of Swan Xian and Lu Biechen. He did not send 7th Madam, Jiao of Song, these outside path cultivators, nor did he send some of the veteran King Pill. Even if only from the younger generation of King Pill, only Wang Lu and Zhu Shiyao met the requirements. Lu Li and Quan Zouhua were obviously not qualified. Whether it was Qianghua or Xiang Liang, they were stronger than them. What does Wang Lu want to do? This was the primary question in front of people. If it were other people, the Earth Immortals didn't need to pay attention to them. They just needed to crush them with absolute strength. However, in front of Wang Lu, they had suffered too many losses, so no one dared to be careless in the pre-match preparation. I think he's deliberately mystifying things. Du Xiaoxiao said, it's a psychological attack, doing the opposite, making us waste our extra energy. That's probably it. Xian Mo said, it doesn't make sense. Even if we waste some energy for no reason, would we lose the game because of this? That would be underestimating the psychological quality of us, the Dixian side who have experienced the Great Era. Fairy Luo Shui speculated, or do they have some secret weapon? Immortal treasure? Immortal pill? Or immortal level method? We only have more of these things in our hands. Thus, all the Dixian side fell into silence. Only Swan Xian and Lu Biechen were still calculating from time to time. However, the results of several calculations were not the same. It was either victory or defeat, all uncertain, making the calculation completely meaningless. Enough, there's no need to worry about it. At the critical moment, the black-clad Dixian side came forward and said, don't worry about what means Wang Lu has, after all, we are the stronger side. In addition, since they have announced the list first, let's also be open and honest. the black-clad man said, and then stretched out his hand to point at the group of Dixie inside. Little Poison Immortal, Shuero 2, Ravenous Wolf, and Bai Zhe, the four of you come on stage. Chapter 672. Less than an hour after the Wanxian League announced the list, Dixian also announced its own list. This was undoubtedly a novelty for the ancient Earth immortals who had always disdained to keep pace with the union of 10,000 immortals. It also proved that after Wang Lu's 5 consecutive victories, he had received enough attention from the other party. However, the more attention Dixian paid, the slimmer the hope for the Wanxian League to win. Little Poison Immortal, Shuero 2, Ravenous Wolf. They are serious. After Dixian announced the list through the signboard that was used to broadcast the competition in each area, the laments of cultivators could be heard everywhere in the City of Immortals. Any one of the 4 people on the list had a thunderous reputation. In the previous 2 months of competition, they had already made outstanding contributions. Outstanding achievements built on the corpses of a large number of 9 regions' cultivators. Because of the words of the black-clad Dixian, the scene in the first 2 months of the grand competition was very cruel. Dixian showed no mercy and repeatedly brutally killed the cultivators of the Wanxian League in the battle. Although killing was not allowed in the grand competition, many of the killings were deliberate. For example, when Little Poison Immortal fought against Senior Red Blood Poison, Senior Red Blood Poison already had the idea of surrendering after his original blood poison was declared invalid. However, before he could open his mouth, his throat was melted by Little Poison Immortal's immortal transformation powder. Until the blood in his chest was completely gushed out, he still could not say the word surrender. This was obviously a deliberate torture. Senior Red Blood Poison died miserably. At that time, Supreme Ting Feng, the master of heavenly book building, also began to question Wang Lu's decision. Dixian's move was to suppress the morale and fighting spirit of the Wanxian League and plant the seed of fear in their hearts. In fact, this tactic was successful for a time. Many cultivators of the Wanxian League did not even dare to look directly at their opponent's eyes when they walked into the arena, and could only display 50 to 60% of their ability. It was not until Wang Lu stepped up and reinvigorated the morale of the Wanxian League with a 5-game winning streak. However, when people saw the names of Little Poison Immortal, Shuero 2, Ravenous Wolf, and Bai Zhe, they still felt a chill. These people were probably the most ruthless and bloodthirsty in the Dixian, especially the previous 3. Before Little Poison Immortal joined the Dixian organization, he was an out-and-out devil. In order to study poison, he did not hesitate to sacrifice the lives of thousands of people. In today's 9 regions, the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl, which was regarded as the most valuable evil treasure of the demons, was a demonic treasure refined from the souls of tens of thousands of innocent creatures. Little Poison Immortal had at least 100 of them. Shuero 2, on the other hand, was basically a lunatic. Although he had the cultivation of a Dixian, he ate raw meat and drank blood, like a savage. He loved human flesh the most in his life. The higher the cultivation, the more he liked the flesh. In this grand competition, he once defeated a Yuanying stage cultivator, and then in front of tens of thousands of people in the audience, he directly swallowed the opponent's soul, pulled out the tendons and skinned the opponent's body. That match almost caused a riot. The relatives and friends of the deceased were ready to rush into the arena to avenge him, despite the obstruction of the golden armored warrior. Fortunately, they were eventually stopped by the golden armored warrior. Although they could not avoid the torture of the small dark room, they finally escaped with their lives. In that fight, Shuero 2 and his flesh apron, which was sewn from the scalps of dozens of Yuanying stage cultivators, became famous. At the same time, he also said that he would take advantage of this grand competition to sew a new apron. As for Ravenous Wolf, he was a bit cleaner than the first 2. He never killed or tortured his opponents. However, in the 3 matches he had fought so far, none of his opponents survived. Even in a relatively low confrontation match, he could still cause this and that kind of accident, and reasonably kill his opponents. If Little Poison Immortal and Shuero 2 were the demons from hell, then Ravenous Wolf was like a ghost hiding in the shadow, low-key, but equally deadly. According to the match list, these three people would be dealt with by Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, and Quan Zouhua. As long as they thought that the three young girls in their prime were likely to fall in the hands of a few homicidal maniacs, the chill in people's heart became even more unbearable. Some enthusiastic cultivators even wanted to take the initiative to find Wang Lu and let him think twice before acting, so as not to cause irreparable losses because of a moment of impulse. However, these people's efforts were, of course, in vain. Once Wang Lu made a decision, how could he easily go back on it? In the midst of the audience's worries, the day of the match finally came. On this day, the central arena, which could accommodate millions of people in Immortal One area, was full of seats. Cultivators from all over 9 regions gathered here to pay attention to this fateful match. Although the whole grand competition had only been carried out for less than 1/3, everyone knew that whether the Wanxian League would reverse the decline and soar to the sky, or fall back into the abyss and completely lose the whole grand competition, all depended on this move. On the rostrum, more than 100 Dixian members, as well as more than 100 Wanxian League elders, had taken their seats. The Dixian side was silent, but the Wanxian League side was in a heated discussion. The discussion about the current situation, the opponent, Wang Lu, and Supreme He Tu. Regarding this, He Tu himself completely turned a deaf ear, closed his eyes, and did not answer. In this match, he gave Wang Lu a surprising trust, completely letting him do whatever he wanted. Even if Wang Lu gave him a list that was puzzling, He Tu still did not change his original intention. He spared no effort to support Wang Lu. However, He Tu himself refused to cooperate, so people's focus naturally turned to Lingjian School, which was also the protagonist of today's competition. Feng Yin Daoist Master, does your lead disciple really have a chance to win, or does he want to bluff? Isn't this list of names a bit too big? Not only are they all people from your Spirit Sword sect, but they are all junior disciples. What do you mean by that? If I remember correctly, during that catastrophe, there were some surviving cultivators in your sect. Each and every one of them is very powerful. Don't hide them, call them out to fight. The outspoken red-robed patriarch always spoke his mind. He even subconsciously said some news that Lingjian School did not want to make public. However, after hearing this, it was inconvenient for Feng Yin to close his eyes and not answer like he Tuesday red-robed patriarch had no friendship with Xingjing sect, but his friendship with Lingjian School was very deep. There was no need to alienate and offend such an ally for no reason. Wang Lu naturally won't fight a battle that he's not sure of, so please rest assured, fellow Daoist Red Robe. Red-robed patriarch felt a bit relieved after getting the assurance from Feng Yin Daoist master. However, after thinking for a moment, he was still not at ease. Even if your family's Lu Li and Zhu Shiyao are talented, isn't their cultivation time too short? Do you think I don't know about the training program of Royal Soldier Sect? At that time, Kuchin found more than a dozen people to help Royal Soldier Sect perfect that training program, and I was one of them. Even if little Wang Lu has the ability to improve that program, the efficiency improvement is limited. At least at this time, they absolutely can't beat Little Poison Immortal and Shuero too. Feng Yin helplessly shook his head. Fellow Daoist Red Robe, even if Lu Li and Zhu Shiyao can't win, it doesn't mean that we will lose this match. Red-robed patriarch was stunned. Don't tell me you're pinning your hope on that dog. Unfortunately, as soon as his voice fell, the clear bell that signaled the start of the match rang in the central arena. In an instant, the attention of millions of people focused on it. Even the curious and outspoken red-robed patriarch put down his doubts and waited for the change in the arena. First, the contestants entered the arena. The moment the bell rang, Dixian's team appeared in the center of the arena. Little Poison Immortal, who was as thin as a child, Shuero too, who was burly and covered in blood, Ravenous Wolf, whose body was like a phantom, half real and half illusory, and Bai Zhe, who was surrounded by 12 golden seals. When the 4 of them appeared, they had already suppressed their strength to King Pill stage. Their primordial spirit and body were all limited to 1/10,000th of their original body. However, even so, millions of spectators still felt a faint suffocating oppression. This kind of oppression did not come from their tyrannical strength, but from the cruel killing intent that was refined in the mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The massive slaughter made them the natural enemy of cultivators, so that people could feel the natural fear of the lower level of the food chain toward the higher level. Do we really want to fight with such an opponent? An old cultivator's body suddenly trembled. This kind of slaughtering demon is not something we can compete with at all. Unless great ancestor Dishing is resurrected, they are invincible in this world. Slaughtering demon, what are you talking about? The old cultivator said in a nearly collapsed tone, you haven't experienced the great war of immortals and demons, so you can't understand the horror of these demons. We are all wrong. We thought they were human beings, but they are actually demons. Demons? As soon as this remark came out, it immediately caused an uproar. Although this old cultivator's realm was not high, only at the level of Yuanying, he had a long lifespan. He had experienced the last great war of immortals and demons and survived. What he had seen and heard alone was a valuable asset, far more valuable than his 4 elements Yuanying. Although he was old and sometimes his mind was not very clear, his judgment about the demon race had never been wrong. Therefore, when he said the slaughtering demon and locked the identity of the demon race, the shock in people's hearts was self-evident. Feng Yin Daoist Master. Is this scene also within Wang Lu's expectation? The red-robed elder was tongue-tied. There were demons in the Dixian, which he, as an elder of the Heavenly Sage Hall, naturally knew. But he never thought that there would be so many demons. Moreover, even Bai Zhe was a demon. No wonder they were merciless when they made their move before, which even made many people in the Wanxian League doubt whether the Dixian really had the sincerity to cooperate against the fallen immortals. Now, the answer was self-evident. The blood feud between the human race and the demon race was not inferior to that of the fallen immortals. However, at this time, a leisurely laughter rang in the ears of the red-robed elder. Don't worry, elder, all of this is naturally within my expectation. Hearing this voice, the elder's mouth opened wider. Wang Lu, why are you here? Because the view here is the best. Chapter 673. When Wang Lu appeared in the audience seat of the central fighting arena of Immortal One area, the focus of the astonished eyes almost pierced him with 1,000 holes. The elders of Heavenly Sage Hall, the young cultivators who came with their elders to watch the fight, and even Dixian, who was sitting next to him, turned their eyes and stared at Wang Lu in disbelief. Wang Lu himself was also surprised. You guys look like you've just seen your wife being stolen, which makes me very embarrassed. Thus, people cast their eyes back to the arena. Facing the 4 slaughtering demons were 3 delicate and juicy girls, Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, and Quan Zouhua. Just when everyone was stunned, they had already entered the fighting arena and were calm and composed under the pressure of Dixian. However, the more they saw this scene, the more confused they were. The red-robed patriarch couldn't help but shout, Wang Lu, you're a contestant in this match, so you shouldn't be in the auditorium now, right? Wang Lu laughed and said, but I don't need to play in this match. You don't need to play? Aren't you the main force? Wang Lu explained, the one-on-one match is best of 5. 2 months ago, my master won the first match, so there are still 4 matches left to be played. As long as we can win half of them, it would be the victory. My side's order of appearance is Little Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, Quan Zouhua, and finally me. As long as 2 of them can win, I don't need to play. This logic should be very simple. The red-robed patriarch almost vomited blood because of Wang Lu's words. You also know that the premise is that they can win. What if they lose? Their probability of winning is more than 90%, so there's nothing to worry about. Upon hearing this, the red-robed patriarch's jaw almost dropped. More than 90%? Are you kidding me? Wang Lu shrugged and said, I'm just telling the truth. When the several Dixian disciples heard this, their eyes suddenly became fierce. More than 90% chance of winning? If it were someone else, they would just laugh it off. Any normal person would think that in this match, only the ancient Earth Immortals would have an absolute advantage and a 90% chance of winning. However, now that the person who said this was Wang Lu, people couldn't help but pay attention to it. Because no matter how many negative comments there were about Wang Lu, it was hard for people to deny the fact that as long as he opened his mouth, there were very few things that he could not fulfill. Could it be that after a few months of training, the girls of Lingjian school really had the strength to overwhelm Dixian? From a purely theoretical point of view, it was not impossible. Xuanxian Lubiechan once did some calculations. If the Wanxian League spent all its resources on a few people, it was indeed possible to create a few insane king pill and nascent soul cultivators in a short time. In the Dixian camp, only Black and a few others could compete with him. Other people such as Xian Mo and Bai Zhe were not his opponents. However, that was only in theory. In practice, the side effects that they needed to bear were too serious. First, a lot of resource consumption. No matter how rich the Wanxian League was in resources, the resources that could create the abnormal king pill were always limited. Second, excessive enthusiasm would ruin the future of a cultivator, making it difficult for them to break through the stage in the future. And with the talent of Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, and the others, if they destroyed their future just for a match, it would be too much of a loss. Taking these factors into account, when Lu Biechen proposed that the Wanxian League might create the abnormal king pill and nascent soul cultivators to fight for the tournament points, the Dixian disciples didn't think too much about it. That was really not in line with Wang Lu's style. However, now it seemed that perhaps he was doing the opposite. Or perhaps, Wang Lu was just bluffing, trying to disrupt the opponent's position. It was true that very few of Wang Lu's words could not be fulfilled, but that was on the premise that he was serious about it. If it was just used to confuse others, his words naturally didn't need to be taken seriously, and even needed to be understood in reverse. Perhaps Wang Lu didn't intend to let Lu Li and the others win, and his winning magic weapon was in other places? Thinking of this, the mood of the Earth Immortals became even more complicated and heavy. Because they suddenly found out that Wang Lu, with just one sentence, had almost disrupted their position. The dozens of Earth Immortals present had different ideas, so naturally, their next strategy was also different. Some were cautious and suggested that it would be better to postpone the match, while some were radical and suggested that Little Poison Immortal and the others should go all out to attack as soon as the match started, so that Wang Lu's 90% chance of winning would go to hell. Soon, the quarrel caused by the disagreement gradually became fierce. All of this was just because of Wang Lu's unexpected statement. If someone said before this that a Golden Core Realm cultivator was able to have such a huge impact on the ancient earthly immortals, it would undoubtedly be a joke. But now, there were probably not many people that could laugh. Wang Lu's magnificent 5-game winning streak had, after all, a great impact on the morale of the Dixian disciples. However, in the audience stand, when the Dixian camp began to fall into chaos, the stabilizing pillar of the camp appeared in time. If you really have such a powerful force, then let us see it. As soon as the black-clad Dixian disciple opened his mouth, he immediately stopped the dispute in the field. Yes, the match hasn't even started yet, but the camp was already in a mess. This was too unseemly. Whether Wang Lu really had a chance of winning or was just bluffing, at least they had to fight a match first. This was not a match to determine the winner. In a best-of-5 situation, the Dixian disciples still had room to mediate. There was no need to be anxious and fall into Wang Lu's rhythm. Black said coldly, "If there are no other questions, let's start the match." Wang Lu smiled. "Okay, but in this match, you actually only send out these 4 small fries, but you won't fight in person? I don't need to fight in a match of this level. It's a pity. I'm actually looking forward to fighting you. How about this, if you're willing to fight, I'll change the order of appearance and fight you in advance. What do you think?" Wang Lu's words caused another burst of astonishment. This black-clad Dixian disciple, who claimed to be a sinner, had a high status in the Dixian camp. His strength was also self-evident. But Wang Lu actually said that he wanted to fight him one-on-one. Where did this courage come from? If it were his master, that abnormal number 1 king pill in 9 regions, He might have the capital to contend against him, but what about him? In the face of everyone's doubts, Wang Lu maintained a calm smile. His eyes were slightly provocative as he waited for the other side's response. On the other hand, for this kind of self-destructive challenge, Black was silent, which made people wonder how he would react. Black, kill him. A Dixian disciple couldn't help but suggest. In his opinion, since Wang Lu had said so, it was better to fight him as he said. If he could be killed on the spot in the arena, this grand competition would instantly lose its suspense and reduce a lot of trouble. However, Black did not respond. He just coldly said, "No need to talk nonsense, let the match begin." The next moment, the space in the arena slightly folded and twisted. The people who confronted each other disappeared one by one and were expelled to the edge of the arena to watch the show. Only Lu Li and a skinny, stooped, dwarf-like figure were left. This was the first match between the two sides. Seeing that the match finally began, the audience quieted down in an instant. All the disputes were put aside. Countless pairs of anxious eyes watched the arena, not letting go of any slight change. "Senior, please advise me." On the arena, Lu Li openly displayed her sword stance, but the tip of the skybreaker in her hand was pointed down, performing a junior salute. Why is there a need to be so polite to the slaughtering devil? Isn't this Lu Li a bit too pedantic? In the audience, the red-robed patriarch could not help but mutter. "Ha, patriarch misunderstood. Little Lu Li is not pedantic." Wang Lu shook his head. "She just doesn't know what to do in the face of the slaughtering devil. Because I didn't teach her how to speak ill of the opponent, she had to obediently perform the junior salute. This is clearly worse than pedantic." Patriarch misunderstood again. "Right now, for little Lu Li, this is just right." As soon as his voice fell, the immortal sword in Lu Li's hand didn't move, but a purple-green sword chi cut through the sky and fell from the sky like a lightning tribulation. In a twinkling of an eye, the tiny figure of little Poison Immortal was engulfed in the surging lightning. Everyone inside and outside the arena was shocked. The momentum of this sword strike was magnificent, and its destructive power directly broke through the limit of King Pill level. It was indeed worthy to be the full power strike of brilliant Sword Heart. The key was that the change in movement was so fast that it was unexpected. That respectful junior salute just now was like a disguise. Lu Li, who had always been known for being simple and honest, actually used such a despicable trick, which really surprised many people present. Red-robed Patriarch's eyes widened. Just as he was about to open his mouth, he heard Wang Lu said in advance, "Patriarch, you misunderstood again." Lu Li didn't mean to launch a sneak attack, but she didn't know the normal follow-up steps. However, this kind of unintentional sneak attack has a very high success rate. Therefore, I haven't helped her correct this problem. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate to meet a senior brother like you. While they were talking, they were also observing the situation in the arena. Lu Li's lightning sword had swallowed little Poison Immortal, but no one thought that the match was over. How could the dignified Dixian, who slaughtered the demons, die so easily? Sure enough, after the lightning dissipated, there was a dark green egg in a deep pit. Its surface was covered with fascia and mucus, and it expanded and contracted rhythmically, swallowing and spitting out electric arcs. The next moment, the green egg suddenly cracked, and a person came out of it. His figure was as small as a child. It was little Poison Immortal. Compared with the beginning, little Poison Immortal had not changed at all. Even his black and green embroidered robe was spotless. Lu Li's full power strike was enough to move a Yuanying stage expert, but it had no effect in front of little Poison Immortal. Lu Li was not discouraged by this. She just raised the immortal sword in her hand and began to prepare for the next attack. At the same time, little Poison Immortal stretched out his withered hand and pointed at Lu Li. "I'm going to make a poison sack out of you." Chapter 674. In the Dixian camp, little Poison Immortal was quite a maverick. His appearance was unprepossessing. He was about 4 feet tall and looked like a child, but his skin was wrinkled and withered, full of tumors and cysts. He was so ugly that he didn't look like a human. Of course, now it seemed that he really wasn't a human. In addition, he was cruel and merciless, killing people like flies. In order to research poisons, the number of people he had slaughtered was innumerable. The number of people he had killed was even more than that of Shuero II and Ravenous Wolf combined. His evil aura made it difficult for the Dixian people to approach him. No one liked such a companion, and Little Poison Immortal disdained to be liked by others. He joined the Dixian camp not to fight against the fallen immortals, but because the former leader made a heavy promise to keep him. Little Poison Immortal had devoted his whole life to the art of poison, without any distractions, without any hesitation. His childlike body and fragile body were not born with it. Instead, it was a result of the tragic failures he had endured in the many experiments with poisons, resulting in an irreversible loss. After countless experiments, even though his mastery of poison had reached perfection, his lifespan was finally exhausted. Thus, he simply changed his own race and used hundreds of millions of creatures as sacrifices to transform himself into a slaughtering devil. From then on, he used the essence of flesh and blood to prolong his lifespan. At this point, even the most vicious demon in 9 regions could hardly catch up to him. How could such an opponent be defeated by a mere heavenly thunder punishment sword? The egg-shaped shell was his biological weapon to make up for the shortcomings of his physical body. While the surface of the outer shell was tough, it was also coated with a large amount of toxic substances. This poison was the original poison of Little Poison Immortal, which could corrupt everything in the world. In addition to flesh and blood, it could even corrode invisible energy. 80% of the power of Lu Li's Heavenly Thunder Punishment Sword was dissolved by the toxin, while the remaining 20% was not enough to break through the egg-shaped shell. After that sword strike, Little Poison Immortal was unscathed. On the contrary, he was highly excited. In his view, this fight was meaningless. However, after seeing Lu Li, he felt that his long dried-up heart was faintly throbbing. Clear as water, sharp as a blade. The immortal sword in the girl's hand had drunk its fill of blood, but she was not tainted by even a speck of dust. He had never seen such a physique in his long life. This was an unprecedented material of the highest quality. I'm going to turn you into a poison sack. With that, Little Poison Immortal directly made his move. He stretched out his withered finger and pointed at Lu Li. The next moment, the girl's slim and graceful figure turned into pus. Little Poison Immortal's attack seemed to be faster than the flying sword. However, after this finger strike, he didn't have the joy of succeeding, because what was turned into pus was not what he wanted, but the stone substitute left by his opponent. The person he had locked onto had disappeared without a trace. According to the data, the biggest feature of Lu Li's brilliant sword heart was her super-strong explosive force, which allowed her to easily send out sword chi that was above her level. However, it was never mentioned that she was also good at speed and variation. Little Poison Immortal's poison technique could instantly kill an ordinary Peking pill expert, but if the opponent's reaction was extremely fast, there was still a possibility to avoid it. Little Poison Immortal was not surprised by this. In his long life, he had seen too many strong people. He had also killed more than 1 or 2 sword cultivators with similar physique to Lu Li. In the era of Little Poison Immortal, it was the glorious period of the immortal cultivation world. There were countless supreme-level powerhouses in 9 regions, and those who had broken through and ascended could also be seen from time to time. And the sword cultivators who were regarded as prey by Little Poison Immortal were all strong, far better than the current Lu Li. In addition to their powerful attack power, those sword cultivators' speed, reaction, and flexibility were all first class. It was difficult for a monotonous attack to hit them. Even the soul curse would be blocked by the spell of the substitute, which was very tricky to deal with. However, the current Lu Li had just stepped into the realm of those mature sword cultivators. She no longer blindly pursued attack power, but instead brought out her own specialty to the extreme, and could handle any environment with ease. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning stage. You can't run away. Little Poison Immortal said and then pointed his withered finger at the sky. The blue sky on the arena suddenly turned green, and then, a drizzle fell. This drizzle was highly poisonous. After it fell to the ground, the vegetation withered and the ground cracked. In a moment, the area with a radius of dozens of miles became a dead zone. And in this curtain of rain, there was a particularly eye-catching arc. It was the sword defense supported by Lu Li's skybreaker. Dozens of miles in radius. This was the limit space set in the arena for the first fight. Little Poison Immortal's finger polluted the sky and then fell a poisonous rain. Although Lu Li had absorbed a lot of actual combat experience during the special training in Royal Soldier Sect and had enriched her fighting means a lot, she was still far from being compared with the opponent. In just one move, she was forced into a dead end. I will refine your body into a poison sac, which will be my next immortal treasure. And your primordial spirit will be stripped out by me as my poison concubine, to accompany me for a long time. With that, Little Poison Immortal stretched out his finger to the sky. Thus, the drizzle became heavier, like a heavenly river pouring down in torrential rain. The highly poisonous rainstorm washed the earth, and the ground melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. The brown ground turned into a dark green swamp. The originally set high mountains in the arena continued to decline and were soon completely swallowed by the swamp. In this green swamp, which symbolized death, there was gradually a bit more vitality, and a new life composed of venom was being born. However, Little Poison Immortal himself gradually disappeared in the poisonous rain and became one with the world. Original magical ability. Is this his original magical ability? In the audience stand, several Supremes of the Wuxia League suddenly got up and looked at the astonishing means of Little Poison Immortal in the arena in disbelief. It was not unusual for a King Pill stage cultivator to promote his original magical ability. In the past, Wang Lu could do it even more exaggerated. However, such a powerful original magical ability was really unheard of. In the King Pill stage, he could destroy the entire world within a radius of dozens of miles and replace it with his own world. If he recovered to his peak state, the entire 9 regions might. No, it's not that exaggerated. There's no need to overestimate his poison. In the audience stand, Wang Lu looked at it leisurely and explained, he's just opportunistically bringing the immortal level poison into the King Pill stage battlefield. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. That's easy for you to say. At this time, the red-robed patriarch really didn't even have the strength to be angry. If it was that easy to bring a prop that did not belong to this stage into the battlefield, Lu Li wouldn't only have the Skybreaker at this time. Instead, she should have dozens of immortal treasures all over her body, which could destroy the world with the God Extermination Thunder. In fact, it was simply impossible. The burden of equipping immortal treasures on the cultivator was extremely heavy. Unless it could be perfectly refined and highly compatible with the cultivator, it could be used freely in the lower stage. Otherwise, forcibly equipping too many high-level magical treasures would only drain the cultivator in an instant, which was akin to suicide. At this time, the strength of Little Poison Immortal was suppressed to the King Pill stage, but he could use the immortal level poison. This could only show that his understanding of poison had reached an incredible level. However, now it was too late to think about it. The first question was, in the face of such a tyrannical opponent, what should Lu Li do? The strong and the weak were clear at a glance. Lu Li was able to use the Heavenly Thunder Punishment Sword in an instant, so the evaluation of the special grade King Pill was well deserved. However, in this level of competition, a mere special grade King Pill was still far from it. In the heavy rain, Lu Li's sword defense had already drifted away. Between heaven and earth, any drop of poisonous water could take her life in an instant. Therefore, she could not let any drop of rain fall on her side. This poisonous water could corrode everything. Lu Li's sword chi quickly disappeared as soon as it left her body, completely unstoppable. Fortunately, the Skybreaker was an immortal sword, so it would not be poisoned. And with Lu Li's King Pill stage cultivation base, it was not difficult for her to wield an impenetrable sword defense. The difficult thing was, in addition to the poisonous rain, after the whole world was poisoned, even the air was contaminated with poison. Lu Li could not escape from it no matter how many changes she made. Seeing that her colorful dress was gradually stained with rust, the immortal sword in her hand began to tremble slightly, and her grasp became unstable. After all, she was not good at defense. Once all her means were restrained, it would be difficult for her to continue. Enough, Wang Lu, let her come back. There's no point in holding on any longer, let her come back. In the audience, many people had begun to persuade Wang Lu to surrender, but Wang Lu still sat indifferently. Don't worry, if she comes back now, won't she lose? It's better than dying. Wang Lu waved his hand. She won't die, rest assured. How could you rest assured? Even if you have a card in your hand, do you really dare to say that it will be effective against Dixian? In case there's an accident. Don't you always like Luli the most? How could you have the heart to let her take such a risk? Wang Lu lightly responded, yes, I have the heart to do it, why are you still so noisy? Don't quarrel, Luli is ready to make her move. Victory or defeat will be decided by this move, watch carefully. Upon hearing this, the crowd pressed down the uneasiness in their hearts and turned to look at the field. The heavy rain became even more miserable. In the poisonous swamp on the ground, the more than 300 meters long poisonous dragons began to overturn the river and the sea. The strength of these poisonous dragons alone was no less than that of the common king pill, and this was just the embellishment of this original magical ability. In this situation, how could Luli possibly turn the tables? Her attack power was indeed powerful. If the heavenly thunder punishment sword continued to strike out, the poison would not be able to be dissolved in time, which could indeed cause trouble for little poison immortal. However, at this time, in the other party's original magical ability, she had become one with the world, so there was no target for her sword to strike. And even if Luli blew up the king pill, it was impossible to break this side of the world. Unless the immortal sword in her hand was the genuine skybreaker, which specialized in breaking this kind of world. Unfortunately, the immortal sword in her hand lacked a spirit, so it was difficult to exert its full power. Then, in the anxious and confused eyes of the people, Luli finally made her move. The moment she made her move, people also saw the hope of victory. The immortal sword in Luli's hand bloomed with unprecedented light. However, it was not the magnificent light of the original skybreaker, but the soft pink light of Rouge Tears. The sword spirit Autumn Beam, beside Luli, held the hilt of the sword with the girl, helping her to awaken the power of the skybreaker. The immortal sword trembled, as if it was whispering resuscitation from a long sleep. With the resuscitation of the immortal sword, the world of Little Poison Immortal began to show signs of instability. In a trance, the divine sword that broke the firmament 10,000 years ago seemed to be coming back. In this world, only Autumn Beam could do this kind of thing. She was the spirit of the immortal sword, and her master, Wang Lu, was good at using the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword. She had repeatedly urged the sword chi with Rouge Tears, so Autumn Beam was very familiar with it. The only problem was that, after all, she was not the sword spirit of the skybreaker, and she was not an ownerless object. At this time, she just came to help temporarily. To wake up the immortal sword that had been sleeping for thousands of years, she was still lacking some experience. The immortal sword skybreaker seemed to be ready to resuscitation at any time. However, it was always one step short and failed to fully reveal its sharpness. Fortunately, there was one person around her who could help her make up for the lack of it. One of the most suitable people to practice swordsmanship in 9 regions, Luli, who could adapt to the tens of thousands of swords in the world and achieve all kinds of incredible magical abilities. The girl moved slightly. She turned her head, grinned, and then, under the nervous gaze of countless people, kissed the plump lips of Autumn Beam. The next moment, the immortal sword skybreaker was completely resuscitation. It flew out of the girl's hand and went straight to the sky. In an instant, the clouds broke the sky, and the tiny figure of Little Poison Immortal fell like a meteor. Chapter 675. He won. He actually won. Outside the arena, thousands of cheers burst out at the same time. However, Just when people were ready to express their inner joy, Wang Lu faintly said, "He won? How come I don't know about it?" In the audience, no one knew how many people wished to cut Wang Lu into pieces. This guy's ability to destroy the atmosphere was too strong. Previously, when Luli fell into a predicament, he was neither fast nor slow, which made people angry. Now that the situation had been reversed in one fell swoop, he poured cold water on people. For the audience to do this, he was more hateful than the enemy. However, no one dared to despise Wang Lu's judgment. Because, not to mention anything else, the awakening of the Skybreaker by Luli was clearly the work of Wang Lu. He could calculate to this point, so how could he not calculate the advantage and disadvantage of this situation? It was just that. After reaching this point, could it be that he still couldn't win? The Skybreaker broke his original magical ability, which was tantamount to a serious injury. Could it be that he still couldn't win against a mere King Pill stage little poison immortal? If he couldn't fight with a serious injury, he wouldn't be able to live until now, let alone join the Dixian camp and fight side by side with a group of human beings as the slaughtering demon. While speaking, the falling little poison immortal suddenly adjusted his position. Although he was seriously injured and thick green blood oozed from every pore of his body, the biting chill in his eyes did not disappear. On the other hand, although Luli broke his original magical ability, she also lost the Skybreaker. Her immortal sword flew straight to the sky but didn't return. Moreover, just now, she had consumed 90% of her true yuan. At present, it was difficult to suppress the poison that invaded her body. Her situation was even worse than little poison immortals, and she was really unable to fight again. Both sides were seriously injured, but in the way of fighting back, it was obvious that little poison immortal was more powerful. At this time, Wang Lu finally left his seat and stood up. "Are you going to give up? It's really a pity." The development of the situation to this point was beyond the expectation of many people. When little poison immortal released his original magical ability, everyone thought that Luli would never have the ability to resist. However, the awe-inspiring might of the sword that broke the firmament was an eye-opener. This fight could be said to be a glorious defeat. In the face of such a powerful opponent, Luli had already fully proved her strength by being able to find a glimmer of hope in a desperate situation. Therefore, even if she admitted defeat, it was understandable. However, in the next moment, Wang Lu's order left everyone dumbfounded. "Liuli, let's go. Charge." People could not believe their ears. Was this guy still human? Wasn't this clearly telling Luli to die? Couldn't he see that Luli, at this time, didn't have the power to fight at all? Forcing her to make a move would only lead to her death? It was rumored that he usually doted on Luli the most. Could it be that it was all false? However, Luli was an obedient person. Under the order of Wang Lu, the girl immediately nodded and then took a deep breath. The King Pill in her jade mansion began to crazily rotate and began to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy. The magical power and true yuan of Daoist Master King Pill could be endless, but there was a limit to the speed of regeneration. If one wanted to restore their strength in a short period of time, they could only absorb the surrounding spiritual energy for their own use. Among them, the higher the grade of spirit root, the higher the efficiency of absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy. Although Lu Li's heavenly spirit root was slightly inferior to Wang Lu's abnormal void spirit root, it was still one of the best in the world. As soon as the King Pill rotated, it immediately turned into a whirlpool, stirring up the surrounding spiritual energy within a radius of several miles. A massive amount of surrounding spiritual energy was absorbed into Lu Li's body and transformed into the usable true yuan of the girl with amazing efficiency. The speed was several times faster than the average peak King Pill. In just a few breaths of time, the true yuan in her jade mansion was filled by more than half. The girl lightly spread out her colorful sleeves, from which more than a dozen light flying swords floated out, drawing a rainbow in the air. The speed of the girl's recovery was very fast. However, when the audience saw this, they only felt a chill in their heart. Because it was not difficult for people with vision to see that this was clearly the final radiance of the setting sun. When Lu Li cast out her spare flying sword, her momentum was like a rainbow, but her tender white face was covered with a layer of green shadow. That was the sign of the spread of the poison. Previously, the girl had accumulated a considerable amount of poison in her body. Although she tried her best to suppress it, it was still restless. Later, when she rotated the king pill and used its power to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy, the poison in her body also circulated throughout her body and penetrated deep into her bone marrow. In the distance, Little Poison Immortal stabilized his figure in the air. Seeing Lu Li's sword array, he just sneered. "You're dead." The poison penetrated deep into her bone marrow, yet she still recklessly accelerated the rotation of the king pill to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy. At this time, perhaps her internal organs had begun to rot, but she didn't know it. Of course, this couldn't be blamed on her. Little Poison Immortal's poison was silent. When the poison person found out that the situation was not right, it was already too late. Seeing that Lu Li had brought about her own destruction, Little Poison Immortal's final strike was dispersed. Because there was no need for him to risk his life against a dead person. As long as he could block her final blow, victory would naturally be in his hands. Moreover, judging from Lu Li's poisoned condition, she might not be able to complete the process of accumulating power. After the poison broke out, not only could it melt the flesh and blood, but it could also melt the true yuan. Perhaps in the end, her true yuan would not be able to keep up with the consumption. Thinking to this, Little Poison Immortal's heart was already faintly looking forward to the scene after the victory. As long as he was fast enough, he should have enough time to extract the primordial spirit of Lu Li and refine her into a poison concubine. He was originally worried that the opponent would see that the situation was irreversible and take the initiative to admit defeat. But now it seemed like it was simply delivering itself to his door. However, just as Little Poison Immortal was slightly absent-minded, Lu Li made her move. At this time, it was clear that she had not finished accumulating power. Only about 70% of the true yuan in her jade mansion had been accumulated, and the sword array was not completely set up. However, she decisively made her move. She put down the sword array of more than 10 flying swords and pointed her fingers like a sword. In an instant, her figure turned into a rainbow and, like a sharp sword, swiftly thrust forward. This sword came as fast as lightning and without any warning. Little Poison Immortal didn't expect that Lu Li would rush to attack at this time, thus, he couldn't help but be surprised. Fortunately, his rich combat experience prevented him from being completely caught off guard. With a wave of his slender arm, he summoned out half of the defensive poisonous egg. That poisonous egg could even block the Sky Thunder Punishment Sword, so he didn't believe that it couldn't block the opponent's incomplete stab. Not to mention before Lu Li made her move, Little Poison Immortal clearly saw that the green color on her face was getting thicker, which meant that the poison might break out at any time. As long as the poisonous egg could block her for a moment, she might not be able to hold on. Then, he held the poisonous egg in front of him like a shield and hid his small and fragile body behind the eggshell, waiting for the victory to come. The next moment, a white sword light flashed in front of him. Little Poison Immortal was slightly startled, and then he was puzzled. Why can I see the sword light? Under the cover of the poisonous egg, I should not be able to see anything. Then he felt a chill on his neck, as if something sharp had pierced into it. I've been pierced. The experience of wandering between life and death made Little Poison Immortal immediately realize that the poisonous eggshell that he regarded as his trump card could not protect him. For a moment of carelessness, the opponent took the opportunity to stab him in his vital part and seriously injured him. Although he didn't understand how the opponent could do it, Little Poison Immortal knew that now was not the time to care about this. His neck was pierced by a sword, and the sharp sword she had begun to rapidly destroy his body. If he were a human, he would have died without a doubt. But now, he was a slaughtering devil, so he wouldn't die so easily. At this critical moment, Little Poison Immortal put his hand on his chest, put his fingers into his clothes, and touched a sarcoma on his chest. It was a poison sac he had hidden. There were 3 million spirits' blood beads in the sac, which could double the power of the poison. It was also the limit that he could control as a Jindan realm cultivator. Once it was detonated, there would be no one alive in the arena, and the opponent's powerful surprise attack would come to an abrupt end. Of course, he himself would suffer irreparable serious injuries. But all of this was not important. When it was necessary to be decisive, Little Poison Immortal could be more decisive than anyone else. The next moment, he pinched the poison sac, and the poison exploded in an instant. The shock wave instantly swept across the surrounding area, and everything in it disintegrated and ceased to exist. However, a sharp sword light broke through this deathly stillness, like a lightning that cut through the darkness in the night sky. The sword light penetrated the chest of Little Poison Immortal along the broken poison sac and crushed the red core in his chest. That was the vital core for slaughtering the devil. There were two vital parts of the demon race, the head and the core in the chest. One of the two could be regenerated continuously, but at this time, both of them were destroyed by Little Poison Immortal. Therefore, he could only die. As the body of Little Poison Immortal fell from mid-air, the figure of Luli appeared. The girl used her body as a sword to pass through the highly toxic domain of Little Poison Immortal. At this time, her whole body was stained with rust, and her exposed hands and head were green in color. But she was still alive. With Little Poison Immortal's poison technique, at this time, Luli should have already turned into pus. Not to mention that Little Poison Immortal finally pinched the poison sac to release the highly toxic domain. She should have already died when she forcibly absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy despite the poison in her body. But she was still alive until now. Although the girl's face was green, it was difficult to hide her brilliant smile. Why? In the audience stand, the Dixian people stood up and looked at the result in disbelief. They couldn't figure out the reason. However, the winner would not explain it. Senior brother, I won. With that, Luli ran out of the arena and came to the audience stand. With rust all over her body, she hugged Wang Lu. I won. Wang Lu nodded, patted Luli's back, and touched her head. Go find the seventh elder to detoxify the poison, and then have a good rest. Luli let out a hum, twisted her waist, and then skipped away. After Luli left, Wang Lu finally sat back down. It was just that, as soon as he sat down, his body couldn't help but sway, his face turned green, and blood oozed out of his 7 orifices. I've learned the poison of Dixian. Chapter 676. In the blink of an eye, the result had been revealed. However, most people's reaction was still the same as a few rounds ago. Looking at the lively Luli, as well as Little Poison Immortal, whose head was separated from his chest, even the audience from the union of 10,000 immortals felt that it was inconceivable. Just like that? The taste of victory was, of course, good, but the inexplicable victory seemed a bit strange. People were willing to cheer for Luli's victory, but, at least they should know why, right? Why could Luli, who had always been strong in attack but weak in defense, repeatedly withstand the baptism of the poison? Moreover, there were signs of poison all over her body, yet she seemed to be fine. Then, why did Wang Lu, who was watching from the sidelines, look like he was deeply poisoned and had a tragic look on his face? In particular, what was the meaning of the last sentence about receiving advice from Dixian's poison? Then, if these two questions were asked in tandem, the answer seemed to be self-evident. After realizing this, people looked at Wang Lu again, and some of their previous dissatisfaction suddenly disappeared. Although they didn't know how he did it, it was obvious that Wang Lu bore the damage that Luli should bear. Thus, the girl with strong in attack but weak in defense could withstand the deadly poison and kill Little Poison Immortal without being affected in the slightest. This was a wonderful move, and the most important thing was that no one could have expected it before. Little Poison Immortal was a seasoned fighter, and the number of cultivators who died in his hands was countless. However, Little Poison Immortal didn't expect that the opponent had this kind of means to transfer the damage. Thus, he was caught off guard and died on the spot. Wang Lu, this kid, really has endless means and is good at creating miracles. No wonder countless people have high hopes for him at such a young age, and he became the core figure of the grand competition. An elder of Heavenly Sage Hall sighed with emotion. Previously, he was not very optimistic about Wang Lu. Because although there were many things about him, he had not seen them with his own eyes. However, he saw this fight from the beginning to the end, and his mood also rose and fell along with the changes of the battle situation. When Little Poison Immortal cast his original magical ability for the first time, he thought that the defeat of this fight was already a foregone conclusion. Later on, when Little Poison Immortal's original magical ability was broken by the Skybreaker, he thought that if Wang Lu still knew what was good for him, he should let Lu Li admit defeat as soon as possible. At least, he still had the upper hand on the battlefield. Who knew that the final result was completely beyond his expectation? Lu Li won, and Little Poison Immortal died. Before the fight, no matter what, he couldn't believe it. Even now, he still couldn't figure out how Wang Lu had done it. Just as he was thinking, someone else said, "That was a beautiful move to replace the damage, but have you ever thought that even though the damage has been replaced, someone still has to bear it? The poison of that Little Poison Immortal, not to mention those in the King Pill stage, even if you and I are in the deity stage, do you think we dare to use our bodies to withstand it?" Thereupon, that elder was once again shocked. Just now, if it were him, although he wouldn't be poisoned to death, his body would suffer some damage. If it were a Daoist master of Yuanying stage, it was likely that his body would disintegrate on the spot. This Wang Lu was only in the King Pill stage, yet he could actually withstand that kind of poison. On this side, the cultivators of the Wanxian League had been completely immersed in this sudden victory. However, in contrast, the Dixian cultivators were furious. 2 against 1, is this how you union of 10,000 immortals fight one-on-one? A woman angrily accused. Beside her, several lamps floated up out of thin air, releasing a disturbing and terrifying aura. In addition, there were 7 or 8 Dixian cultivators who loudly echoed, extremely dissatisfied with the match just now. Wang Lu could use the method of stealing the sky to bear the injury of Lu Li, which was indeed powerful. However, no matter how powerful he was, he still had to follow the rules. It was a one-on-one fight, but he was clearly 2 against 1, superimposing his own strength on Lu Li. This kind of victory was naturally not convincing. In this regard, Wang Lu closed his eyes and said nothing, and then took a deep breath. The green color on his face quickly dissipated, and even the blood that oozed out of his 7 orifices flowed back along the original path. In just a moment, his face returned to its original state. Then he opened his eyes, looked at the people opposite him, and gently tilted his head. "Are you sure you want to argue with me about this?" The woman who took the lead angrily said, "If you don't make it clear today, I think there's no need to continue this grand competition. Every grass and tree in the Tomb of Immortals has nothing to do with your Wanxian League anymore. On the contrary, in the future, we will go out and teach you, the later generations of cultivators, how to control the beautiful rivers and mountains of 9 regions." Pfft! Upon hearing this, Wang Lu unceremoniously smiled. "Lamp woman, are you out of your mind? Who do you think you are to say such ruthless words to me? When did you make the decision about the Tomb of Immortals?" These words were ruthless and ruthless, like a slap in the face. That lamp woman's face immediately changed, and the 7 ancient lamps around her shone brightly. However, Wang Lu became even worse. "At this time, you're flustered and exasperated, but that's just to cover up your guilty conscience. Because this match has finally exposed your fatal flaw, that is, you, Dixian cultivators, will also die. As long as you die in the arena, you're really dead. Whether you suppress your strength to 1% or 1,000th, once you die, you will vanish into thin air. The peak strength of Little Poison Immortal is more than 10,000 Lu Li, but he was killed by Lu Li's sword in the arena. Although your Dixian cultivators are strong, you only have 100 people. 1 death means 1 less. Therefore, you can't afford to die, you don't dare to die. Therefore, after the start of the match, you frantically tried to kill us, even ignoring the basic cooperative relationship. You just want to kill us so that we won't dare to fight you in the arena, because then you can sleep easy. Therefore, now you're afraid that in every match from now on, the Wanxian League will not hesitate to fight with you, and you can't afford it at all." Then, he turned his head to the elders of the Wanxian League and loudly said, "Do you understand? From now on, we have to go all out in every fight, even risk our lives. As long as we dare to fight, the opponent will not dare to fight. Only when they don't dare to fight anymore, can this meaningless killing stop." With that, facing the astonished Dixian, Wang Lu gently smiled. "That's why I reminded you before. Do you really want to argue with me on this issue?" "Nonsense." Burning Lamp Female Immortal wanted to refute, but her momentum was much weaker than that of Wang Lu. Wang Lu no longer paid attention to her. Instead, he turned his gaze elsewhere and then softly explained. "Back to the fight just now, the principle is actually very simple. Lu Li and I both have a same body insect in our bodies." "Same body insect?" A Dixian frowned. He couldn't remember what it was. He turned to look at his companions, but they also couldn't figure it out. After a while, someone invited Luo Shui Fairy, who was proficient in all kinds of arts. She pondered for a moment and then said, "It's a magical insect that only exists in the Age of Desolation. It appears in pairs, and as long as it is planted in two people, they can share the damage from each other. It's indeed the same as the performance in the fight just now. It's just that, this kind of insect should have been extinct for a long time. Unexpectedly, there are still people who can cultivate it. If I'm not mistaken, it's that Miss Awu, right?" "Awu?" Several Dixian around her could not help but ask. Before this fight, Awu once had a poison fight with Little Poison Immortal and easily won. It was just that later on, Little Poison Immortal said that during that fight, he happened to be testing a new poison, so he was distracted and not in a good state. As for that Awu, her strength was mediocre and not worth paying attention to. However, from the beginning, Luo Shui didn't believe the words of Little Poison Immortal. How could a demon who spent his whole life on poison, who was known as Poison Immortal, accept the fact that his poison was inferior to others? Even if he deceived himself, he would find enough excuses. That Awu was definitely a big enemy of Dixian in the grand competition. She had already told Black about this and got his approval. Miss Awu has mastered the witchcraft of the Age of Desolation, and her attainment is profound. She could defeat Little Poison Immortal without him knowing it. If she could cultivate the same body insect, it would be a matter of course. Wang Lu said with a smile, "Sister Awu is indeed powerful, but there's no need to exaggerate the witchcraft of the Age of Desolation. Although the effect of this same body insect is magical, it also has many restrictions. First of all, the two people must have similar cultivation base, which greatly reduces its practicality. Secondly, the two people must trust each other unconditionally, even if they die in each other's hands, they are willing." Hearing this, Luo Shui was somewhat incredulous. "You would trust a person unconditionally?" In the information, Lu Li did trust Wang Lu unconditionally, but it was not necessarily the other way around. Although Wang Lu doted on Lu Li, it was in a condescending manner. To say who would this scheming person trust unconditionally, of course. Wang Lu said with a faint smile, "I trust my ability to train very much. Little Lu Li has been trained by me for so many years, so she is just like my own hand and foot. What's so strange about trusting my own hand and foot? In short, whether the same body insect is magical or not has nothing to do with the issue we are discussing. Back to the topic, you fought 2 against 1. Before Luo Shui's words could finish, she was interrupted by Wang Lu. Fairy Luo Shui seems to have misunderstood. Towards Luo Shui, Wang Lu's attitude was much better. In this battle, what played a role was nothing more than the same body insect in Lu Li's body. That insect transferred the damage, so she could fight freely. But it has nothing to do with me. Luo Shui said, "Without you, where would her damage be transferred to? You played a vital role in it, so of course, you have a share. This idea is wrong. According to Fairy, if there were no parents of Little Poison Immortal, naturally there would be no Little Poison Immortal. Then, in the match just now, Little Poison Immortal brought his parents to fight together? Pfft! On the spot, there were cultivators from the Wanxian League side who laughed out loud. Upon hearing this, Luo Shui frowned. This is sophistry. Whether it's sophistry or not, in fact, it's clear at a glance. From the beginning to the end of the battle, I was in the audience seat, but you insist that I participated in the battle. This is sophistry. If you don't accept it, you can also sit in the audience seat and exert your influence on the field. This arena is created by you. If you can influence the field without anyone knowing, please do it. These words hit the nail on the head. You can't win by reasoning. In any case, I did it, so if you have the ability, you can also do it. Of course, the Dixian side couldn't do it. The magical ability of the Age of Desolation was extremely rare for the Dixian side. Otherwise, how could they consider the same body insect, this kind of heaven-defying thing, and try to prepare as much as possible? Fairy Luo Shui sighed and quietly discussed with several of her companions, and the protesting crowd gradually dispersed. At present, for the Dixian side, they could only swallow this loss. Fortunately, the restriction of the same body insect was extremely great. In this King Pill battle, except for Lu Li, perhaps no one else could meet the condition of implanting the goo with Wang Lu. There were still 3 more matches, and there was still hope to win. At this point, Black, who had been silent all this time, also nodded and said, "Get ready for the next match." Chapter 677. With the order of Black, the third match of the King Pill Group Challenge officially began. Zhu Shiyao and Shuero too, who were previously forced to the edge of the arena, were released at the same time and placed in the middle of the arena. Zhu Shiyao still looked cold and indifferent. In the center of the arena where millions of people gathered, her figure looked slender and thin, like a delicate girl. Only the brilliant sword light of the great sun golden brilliant sword in her hand made her show a bit of fierce momentum. In contrast, Shuero Tu's momentum was much stronger. This massacring devil was naked, only wearing a human skin apron. The apron was stained with blood, and there were several bloody pieces of meat hanging at the corner. Even from a distance, there was a bloody smell. In the past, Shuero Tu would intimidate his opponent with a lot of flesh and blood before the start of the fight. There was a pocket sewn in the human skin apron, and there was a universe of flesh and blood in the pocket. It was just that, after witnessing the fiasco of Little Poison Immortal just now, this massacring devil, who was known for his arrogance and boldness, was surprisingly careful. Some cards, it was better to hide them until the end and not use them, than to take them out only to find that they were ineffective. Shuero too was well aware of how poisonous the tumor on Little Poison Immortal's chest was. 16,000 years ago, when he fought against Little Poison Immortal, that tumor had melted 100 of his flesh and blood mountains and 100 rivers of boiling blood. However, just now, when the tumor detonated, the all-pervasive poison field was driven straight into by Lu Li and broken by her sword. Little Poison Immortal's most trusted card failed to save his life. Shuero too was more murderous than Little Poison Immortal, but he was also more afraid of death. He liked to slaughter cultivators and cut off their flesh and blood because he believed that other people's flesh and blood could be turned into his own use, and his own flesh and blood were not easy to die. He had the Dixian stage and the massacring devil body. He was the most difficult person to die in the Dixian stage. Even when he fought against the fallen immortal, he could still survive the full blow of the latter. However, in this grand competition, he suddenly found that his biggest reliance seemed to be disappearing. Although he was still incomparably powerful when compared to cultivators of the same realm, being forced to stay in the King Pill realm, he couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as himself when he was at his peak. Little Poison Immortal was also a person who was not easy to die. Although he was not afraid of death, he did not want to die. Moreover, his poison technique had reached the pinnacle, and even the fallen immortals could not kill him. However, he died in the death arena, under the sword of a lowly King Pill cultivator. In the battle just now, Wang Lu said that it was to intimidate his opponent, so that Dixian would not dare to risk his life rashly. The lamp lady said that he was talking nonsense, but in fact, Wang Lu was right, because Shuoro too knew that he really didn't dare to risk his life easily anymore. As a matter of fact, this grand competition was not that important to him. No matter who won in the end, it made no difference to him. If the Dixian side won, he would not get more recognition. People would only treat him as a mad dog, throw him the hardest and most tiring work, and kick him away when they didn't need it. Under the threat of the fallen immortal, human and demon could indeed cooperate, but the massacring devil was not one of them. And if the Wanxian League won, he would not be ostracized because of this. Dixian could be rated as a first-class fighting force, so that he could be put in an important position everywhere. Even if people didn't like him, when they knew how powerful the fallen immortal was, they had to turn to him for help. That being the case, why should he risk his life for an insignificant victory or defeat? Would it do him any good? Once he had such an idea, Shuoro II's momentum became less aggressive. Although the human skin apron was terrible, he didn't take out the immortal treasure, meat cleaver, that he was really famous for. This gesture might not be noticed by the union of 10,000 immortals, but the earth immortals frowned one after another. What does Shuoro II want to do? He doesn't seem to have any intention to fight. On the other side, when the cultivators of the Wanxian League heard this, they immediately blushed with shame. This is called no intention to fight? The soaring blood and qi made the audience feel uncomfortable. If he was full of fighting intent, what kind of scene would that be? One must know that this was the lowest middle-level King Pill group in the grand competition. If it was replaced with the supreme level, would they still be able to hold the stage? As for the situation on the stage, people didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Shuoro II made it clear that he didn't want to fight seriously. It didn't even matter whether he won or lost. However, the opponent didn't seem to appreciate it. Zhu Shiyao always held the great sun golden brilliant sword in her hand. Her two clear eyes stared at the opponent seriously, not letting go of the slightest change. Although the girl's momentum was not strong, it gave people a sense of crisis, as if there was a hidden needle and a cotton floss, as if facing a beast waiting for an opportunity. Shuoro II didn't want to fight, but Zhu Shiyao seemed to be full of fighting intent. This made Shuoro II feel very uncomfortable. I've already made it clear that I'm going to throw the game, but you're still eager to fight. Do you think I'm really afraid of you? You really don't know what's good for you. Yes, for me, it doesn't matter whether I win or lose. But because it doesn't matter, even if I kill you in this fight, no one can say anything about it. Thinking of this, Shuoro II's two thick eyebrows gradually stretched out, and a burst of crazy killing intent surged in his heart. In his eyes, a blood red gradually covered his field of vision. And the slender and graceful girl in his line of sight also turned into a pile of bones, blood, and flesh. Zhu Shiyao, the big sister of Lingjian's school, sword spirit root, stellar divine eyes. The bones, blood, and flesh in Shuoro II's eyes gradually became good material. He was not as greedy as Little Poison Immortal, who wanted to occupy the opponent's body and primordial spirit. However, later on, as long as he could take a few drops of blood and a few pieces of flesh from the opponent, that would be a good harvest. After 16,000 years of sleep, the degeneration of 9 regions was astonishing. However, after the Age of Chaos, there were many amazing and brilliant cultivators. Not to mention that Wang Wu, her disciple, was also a great figure. The girl in front of him, though not so brilliant in intelligence, in terms of cultivation aptitude, was not inferior to Wang Lu. The physique of sword spirit root was also extremely rare in the glorious era of cultivators. Thus, Shuoro II finally pulled out his knife, which made the Dixian people outside the field a little relieved. The knife was a meat cleaver, the treasure that made Shuoro II famous. The knife was 2 feet long, wide and thick. Its shape was not like the knife on the battlefield at all, but the butcher's knife. It was just that, this knife was condensed with the law of heaven and earth. Once the knife was out, it must see the flesh and blood. No matter how great the ability was, it was difficult to escape the law. He once fought with a Supreme of Deshang stage. The other party cultivated an indestructible body, which was not weaker than ordinary immortal treasure, and could rely on it to resist the heavenly tribulation. However, Shuoro Tu's meat cleaver made 13 cuts in a row, which cut off all the flesh and blood of his hands and feet, leaving only 4 white bones. Now, this knife was naturally not as sharp as it was at its peak. In the king pill stage, the meat cleaver's ability to disintegrate the body was much weaker. However, even if it only exerted a negligible trace of the law of immortal treasure, it was enough to defeat a little king pill. After Shuoro Tu pulled out the knife, he looked at the opponent's reaction. That was because he needed to see the girl's reaction to decide whether to cut more or less when he used the knife later. It was just that, the moment he looked up, the girl in front of him suddenly disappeared. Without hesitation, Shuoro Tu raised his hand and slashed. This slash didn't have any amazing power, it couldn't even stimulate the 3-feet-long blade chi, but when the slash came out, there was blood. When the meat cleaver was halfway through, the blade was dyed red. A line of blood sprinkled down from mid-air, and Zhu Shiyao, who just disappeared, appeared. The line of blood from her left shoulder to her right leg seemed to divide her body into 2 halves. However, Zhu Shiyao's eyes didn't waver in the slightest, as if the injury on her body didn't exist. She was in mid-air, only 10 feet away from Shuoro Tuesday. She thrust her great sun golden brilliant sword forward, and the 3-feet-long blade immediately cut through the space and went straight to the vital spot between Shuoro Tu's eyebrows. Although this sword strike didn't have the imposing manner of Lu Li's brilliant sword heart, the angle and strength of the sword strike were just right, which made Shuoro Tu, who bore the brunt of the attack, feel extremely uncomfortable. Because no matter how he responded, it seemed to be wrong. The meat cleaver had seriously injured Zhu Shiyao, but unexpectedly, she seized the initiative. At this time, his blade momentum had been exhausted, but the opponent's sword momentum was still rising. Shuoro Tu didn't want to take this sword strike head-on. Although he could give it a try with his physical strength, the death of Little Poison Immortal was right in front of him, so how could he dare to be careless? The next moment, the human skin apron was shaken by him. There was a mountain and river hidden in this apron, a mountain and river of blood and flesh, which was equivalent to the essence of hundreds of millions of creatures. Unless the opponent could kill hundreds of millions of people with one sword strike, otherwise, he couldn't be hurt. Once, Little Poison Immortal used a tumor to melt 100 mountains of flesh and 100 rivers of blood, but compared to the entire mountain and river of flesh and blood, it was still only a small part. The current human skin apron didn't have such a great magical ability, but the opponent would never be as strong as Little Poison Immortal. How many people could a mere sword of King Pill kill? 1,000? 10,000? For Shuoro Tu, it was just a drop in the bucket. At the same time, Shuoro Tu became more cautious. A hidden arm in his abdomen quietly grasped a knife hidden in his fat. It was a saber that was rarely shown to others. It was called deboning. It was 6 inches long, and its blade was thin. It was flexible and frivolous, but it was a sharp weapon for defense. However, the next moment, the great sun golden brilliant sword suddenly penetrated the apron, and the sword momentum was so fast that the deboning knife couldn't react. When Shuoro Tu came back to his senses, the sword edge had already penetrated 3 inches into his forehead. At the same time, a stream of starry river-like sword chi went all the way down from his forehead and went straight to the core of his chest. Zhu Shiyao's sword didn't kill thousands of people, but only one person. That person was called Shuoro Tu, and now, his life was hanging under the sword. Shuoro Tu had never seen the power of stellar divine eyes, and he didn't know that once Zhu Shiyao used her sword, it would be more difficult to block than Lu Li's sword. However, in the moment of crisis, he became even calmer. At this time, any escape would not work. Since his existing means could not stop the opponent's deadly sword strike, then he had to change the way. Go all out. Only by going all out could he save his life. No matter how strong the opponent's sword strike was, it was still driven by a person. If he could kill the person one step ahead of time, the sword momentum would vanish. Therefore, Shuero too, who had always been afraid of death, was no longer afraid of death at this moment. He endured the pain and horror of the sword edge entering his body and focused his attention on his right hand, where there was a meat cleaver. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.